Introverts. What social interaction takes your battery down to 0% instantly? Oh, easy. Anywhere where there's loud noise or a lot of noise. I travel a lot in my work, and it often includes staying in a remote city for 2 or 3 days, doing full work days at a customer's facility, and then coming back home. My survival techniques are hotels. I find them calming, as they're like airports. You've seen one, you've seen most of them. I got sent to a remote facility, but the customer's liaison guy invites me to their home instead. I politely decline, and I try all of the excuses in the book, but he's not taking no for an answer. Eventually, he starts to get insulted, and my boss tells me we kinda need this deal and asks me to go. After the flight, I get picked up and we do a full day at the facility, then we go to the guy's house. They have 2 children who are hyper and think I'm there just to play with them. I try my best to show happy face, but internally, my battery has already been dry for a long time. Finally, the kids go somewhere, and I think I have some time off, but now the guy offers me a beer. Okay, I tell him I've been trying to distance myself from alcohol, but he still drinks a couple of beers and becomes annoyingly talkative. At this point, I'm screaming internally. It's around 9 p.m., and I see this as a good time to go. It's been a long day. I think I'll go check my email and stuff and go to sleep, and I head upstairs, which has my room. I hear them talking. The wife is telling the guy that I might see them as bad hosts if he leaves me alone. The husband, however, wants to drink more beer, so the wife comes up. To my horror, I have absolutely nothing in common with her. She starts talking about their kids and goes on for over half an hour of oversharing the details about their life, while my brain has already frozen from the whole situation. Finally, I get to sleep, and I get woken up over an hour before my time, as apparently the family has super long breakfasts where they just slowly eat and chat about stuff. I have zero energy left from the previous day, and I just stare into the void, while the whole family watches a stupid cartoon and they deeply analyze what's going on. I'm supposed to be having 2 to 3 more days of this, but I call my boss when I get a break and I tell him I can't take this anymore. He now realizes I'm not joking and arranges an emergency job for the next day. So after the second day is done, we agree that the finishing touches will be done remotely now that the hardware's installed, and after the day I finally head back to the airport. My host is noticeably upset, and on the way to the airport he tells me he had their relatives coming tonight, and he had hoped we all could have done something together. In short, my social interaction battery shorts and dies if I don't get a hotel for multi-day on-site jobs. Okay, so the narrator is definitely an outgoing introvert, and I'm capable of batting down the hatches for all sorts of situations. But this household seems like an innavigable nightmare to me. Constant face-to-face contact and questioning, combined with rambunctious kids? Who can deal with that? Also, did they invite you over to save the company money, or are they actually that psychotically social? Hey, let's get a drink, you and me. Sure. And then at the pub, oh, when I said just you and me, I actually meant you, me, and my friend from uni that you don't know, but with whom I go way back and will talk to all night while ignoring you. And then I'll just get lost for an extra long bathroom break, leaving the 2 of you alone to the conversational equivalent of a head shark screwing a tortoise. Office team buildings, or any employment-related mandatory fun. From an introvert who delivers these sort of team-building exercises, don't worry, the other side is just as draining. Family gatherings with loud music, crowded places, people who don't know how to stop talking. Now imagine being in a crowded place with someone who won't shut up. Arguments can drain me from 100% to 0 real fast. Confrontation in general, I'd say, is my arch nemesis. It's even worse when it's a pointless one. It's bad enough when you're listening to one, it really bums the mood. Never mind when you're put in one personally. Every time I get into one, I always lose and can't get a rebuttal in because I don't know what to say half the time due to stutters that quickly make any manner of gathered thought shatter to pieces. In short, I suck at arguments. When you're at a party where everyone else knows each other, I hate going to parties where I know 1 or maybe 2 people. You want to interact with them, but don't want to follow them around like a little puppy dog because you don't want to talk to anyone else. Work. Customer service has made my skin crawl since day 1, but it does pay the bills. Unexpected people at a gathering, or many people coming and going. My in-laws always seem to have a lot of random people living with them, and you truly never know who's going to be at their house until you walk in the door. I can't prepare myself if I don't know how many or which people I can expect to see. My mother-in-law also tends to bring random people with her whenever invited over. Well, they were at the house when we left and they wanted to come too. I hate having unexpected strangers in my house. It instantly takes away the feeling of it being my safe zone. So it's probably not surprising that I don't invite my in-laws over very often. It's extremely rare that I go to their house. They wanted to come too. I guess that's because mother-in-law invited them and told them it would be fine and that you have a more the merrier attitude like her. And that it would be fun. Turns out it's completely awkward, you're angry, stressed and uncomfortable, and the guest is uncomfortable too. And the mother-in-law is oblivious. I'm an extreme introvert, and while I love the idea of meeting new and interesting people, it's hard to do when the group is already familiar with each other and you're just the outlier trying to listen to everything said and read everyone so you can at least try to jump in and act like you're part of the group. But instead, you're just sort of the quiet one for the day unless someone talks to you or you find an opening. Running into an old friend you've grown distant from. Like, do we acknowledge each other and have a full-on conversation? Or do we just do the head nod and move on? Okay, let's go around the room and everyone say a little something about themselves. Now everyone get into groups of 2. Look around the room, everyone is somehow already partnered up in 10 milliseconds flat. Damn it. Going to any store where it's packed. If I see a store or restaurant that's too crowded, I just leave immediately. I just refuse to have to deal with that. One-sided conversations. The first moment they talk over or interrupt and don't say, "Sorry I interrupted what you were saying," my battery just drains instantly. Anything after work. Work is draining enough. The arranged by management after-work activities that are not required at all, but if you don't go you get tagged as not a team player, those kinds of events are the worst. Bonus points if they revolve around drinking and you don't drink. I'm pretty sure my career at my current company is over due to not drinking with the manager after work. Going to places and then more people being there than I expected. Just a couple of days ago, I had plans for me and 2 friends to just chill at my house, and somehow I got roped into going somewhere else with 5 or 6 people. I spent most of the time hanging back on my phone. Definitely when you can't get your words into a conversation. You make an honest effort to be more outward, but people talk over you and you just give up. Why are you shy? Why don't you talk? Why are you shy is a baffling lack of awareness about people's inherent mental blocks that I just don't understand. One of my dear friends has a sleeping problem and was advised by one of his colleagues to just get a good night's sleep to just feel better. It feels like the same amount of breathtaking stupidity. When the really sweet, fast-talking 13-year-old girl from across the street sees me out front and comes over with yet another little bracelet she's made for me, I don't hear well, in addition to being an introvert, and her chirpy little voice is incomprehensible. I don't want to be rude to her and wouldn't want to hurt her feelings over anything in the world, but I don't want to be her grandma, so it's very stressful. Kids are usually very receptive if you just explain what your problem is. I'm sure if she's a sweet enough kid to make you a bracelet, then she'll happily understand if you explain your hearing issue. One-on-one interactions where I'm in any sort of charge. Anytime I'm leading around a new hire or an intern at work and need to take them around all day, take them to lunch, stuff like that. It's exhausting. Being on point and being responsible for another person's experience of their day is just so much pressure. That's it for me too. New trainee day is the worst. There's a stranger, I have to interact with them one-on-one, all frickin' day. I genuinely care about them and want them to do well. I know that their progress depends on me, at least somewhat, which means I need to do well, but seriously, when it's halfway through the shift and I need a break, am I doing my best? Training is usually followed by a one-on-one meeting with a supervisor about the trainee and their progress. Please just let me crawl into a beer. Having to engage in small talk really wears me down. Like 2 sentences in and I'm exhausted. I love deep conversations, but small talk just kills my soul. I've been looking for this, especially when it's an extrovert that can't stand silence. Car rides with them are so draining because you're essentially trapped, and since they can't have silence, it's a constant conversation. I mean, my man, if you drain all my energy, we're gonna crash. Helpful advice that's really just a bunch of judgments of your life choices in disguise. Also, any conversation where someone starts suggesting an essential oil blend will solve all of my problems. It would just take less effort to say, all interactions with my mother-in-law, I guess. I used to have acne like a normal teenager and everyone tried to help me. I never ask for help. First day of a new school. In-laws. When people say something snide and I can't for the life of me tell if they're joking, sarcastic, or serious. Large parties or anywhere with booming music and drunk people. I can handle groups just fine, but all of this loud music and the shouting gets me in 10 minutes. Listening to someone boast. Being on the receiving end of an extrovert monologuing in a social situation where I need to play along or be friendly and engaged for whatever reason. So, why are you so quiet? Basically just being taken to a club or party where I know no one and one of these things is guaranteed to occur. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Someone commenting on how much you talk. Either, wow, talkative today, or Sally sure is quiet. It's like, I was comfortable until you had to start treating me like you were tourists at a zoo exhibit. Corporate functions. I'm on the spectrum, but I've learned how to bullcrap my way through over the years. I manage several teams, and honestly, they don't need much managing. They're so awesome at what they do, so I let them run pretty much autonomously. I clear roadblocks, which I do quite effectively because I have the time to formulate, write, edit, or rewrite any emails before they get sent, but in live group functions it takes so much effort to be on the spot, it's just draining. An overly happy person, to the point where you think they're either faking it or wonder if they are actually that happy all the time. For me, it's the energy. It's hard to be around someone that has really high energy. When I'm at a party with my husband where I don't know anyone, and he has to leave to go get beer or go to the bathroom or help someone else, that's when the nightmare starts. Malls. I hate malls. So crowded and teenagers are usually out there in groups. They're sometimes so loud and trashy, and I get flashbacks to high school. That's the worst. Thank frick for online shopping. Waitresses flirting for tips. Likewise, flirty or demanding customers. For me, right now, it's mostly talking to someone I don't know that well one-on-one. I don't like small talk. I prefer deep discussion of things, and if I don't know the person, it's hard to find a topic to go into a deep discussion about. That's why I prefer to have a few people to talk to at a time, so they can talk about whatever they want to talk about, and I could just add something when I have something to add, instead of having to constantly think about what I had to say next. Mandatory team-building exercises at work. Look, I have nothing against my coworkers, they're so nice, and I like them enough to make chit-chat with them. I don't like them enough to do some stupid team-building activity that just wastes time and is nowhere near as fun as the organizer wants it to be. Going to Walmart. Specifically, Walmart and only Walmart. That place drains my soul. I can go in happy, energetic, and social, and leave wanting to lie down and not be alive in the parking lot while yelling at whoever was unlucky enough to come with me. I think we all have that one store. For the narrator, it's actually IKEA. Maybe it's the fact that I can only go when there's horrifying quantities of families and there's screaming kids in there. Maybe it's the fact that it's a mega drive away, or maybe it's the fact that I have to walk through a fricking maze to get to the one item I actually want. Sorry, folks. Struck a nerve there. Got any plans for the weekend? As well as, Happy Monday. Did you do anything fun this weekend? My wife will tell me, my friend is inviting her husband out to lunch. I want you to meet him. I called out to work the next day because I didn't get my alone time that day on my scheduled day off. I hate that. All the guys in that situation have in common is that we know half of a friendship pair. The funny thing is, neither guy wants to be there. You're just there to keep him out of their conversation. You want me to meet him? Whatever. I have my own friends and I'm not taking applicants. When seemingly benign topics of conversation set people off into outraged rants about how either everything's a conspiracy or how everyone is out to screw them over. And every time you either disagree with them or try to clarify your point, they double down and catastrophize even more. I mean, F me for making small talk. Anyone yelling at me, I just black out and have no idea what I said. Family gatherings, I start blabbering, but I have no idea what I said. Then I feel so tired afterwards, like I've done heavy labor. Being a +1 to my boyfriend. I have a serious face and everyone keeps asking what's wrong. So I have to smile a lot so they leave me the frick alone. Here is the list of things that are setting me on the path to becoming a low-level Batman villain. Screaming kids or babies. They're fine when they're playing or happy. Screaming adults. People who play loud music in public. Large gatherings of people, like in cities and stuff. Full buses and subways. And people who try to interact with me even though I'm wearing headphones if it's not important. When someone I don't like tries to speak to me. That seems really general, I know, but it just makes me feel dead inside. Enjoying quality time by myself and someone decides to invite themselves to hang out, like if I'm playing a game and then they try to teach me how to play. Ugh. I hate people who just drop by. If I wanted you to be there, I'd have invited you. I just stand in the doorway and talk to them and don't invite them in. A sudden, unexpected and unplanned invitation to someone's house or party or whatever. I need time to prepare mentally and such. All social interactions, though that's more my social anxiety doing that. Grocery shopping. For whatever reason, that's the bane of my existence. I hate feeling like I'm holding up the line, feeling people judge me for every purchase I make, then looking awkward, bagging the groceries and taking them home. I legitimately only go grocery shopping when it's dark and raining so that no one's there. And I've gone days without eating anything because I was too anxious of going. Also, hair salons, where for some reason people always expect me to talk to them, and the conversation always ends up at, "So, what do you do? Oh, you study philosophy. Can you even find a job in that field? You're gonna be poor." Do you have a girlfriend yet? No! Just no! Is it really that hard for people to understand some of us just can't attract anyone? Take your platitudes into the deepest recesses of your rectal cavities. There's a beautiful thing called natural evolution, and some people just die alone. That's it. Corporate networking. Going to a crowded place with many children. Tough luck for me, I have a 3-year-old with another on the way. IKEA, especially with someone who just wants to meander idly around. I don't even know why, but I get about half an hour into an IKEA trip, and I get flashes back to a childhood spent largely being dragged by my parents around that blue and yellow Swedish hellscape. IKEA is my personal hell. Good kitchenware, though. Really? I find IKEA weirdly therapeutic, like a create-your-own-adventure sort of thing. Being forced to stay. I'm an extrovert, but nightclubs drain me. It's not really interaction, but simulates it badly. When any elderly family member asks you what you do in life, and you can't figure anything since you're anxiety personified and you just make up some bullcrap. The narrator just tells older family members that he works on computers on the internet, and that seems to at least content the ones who are over 70. If they ask for specifics, though, that's on you. Icebreaker activities. The level of hate I have for icebreaker activities cannot be measured. Messing up mid-sentence and bluggling to messing up mid-sentence and struggling to correct yourself. Pretty much when there's more than 10 people in my vicinity. It's like all the extroverts suck the energy out of me. Being excluded during any activity or conversation, like they can convince you to go with them or do something with them, and then they pretty much ignore you the whole time. That makes me want to go home and do nothing. Working with people, or any customer service job to be honest. Interacting with extroverts who are superficial, acting in a winner or loser competition. Everything has to be about them and how great they are. Exhausting. Semi-formal work functions. Watching a movie with family that's about boring crap. And then comes a bedroom scene and everyone pretends they have no idea what's happening. And if I get up to go pee or grab a drink, they insist on pausing it when I was just wanting it to be over. Sitting at a long table at an event. I always end up at an end where there are more people I don't know and it's too awkward to get up and stand down near the end where I do know people or shout across other people to make conversation. Any activity that requires my participation be upbeat and into it. Oh, here we go. First, the hair salon. I have long hair, so I'm there for 1 to 3 hours depending on the service I'm having done. I force myself to talk to my hairstylist so he or she doesn't get bored. And then there's social gatherings with co-workers. I work for the state in different offices, so I know a lot of people, and even though I'm usually quiet, everyone wants to talk to me or be my friend. I do my best one-on-one with people and like to talk about something meaningful instead of chit-chat. Job interviews, especially when they're longer than 30 minutes. When people start talking about me or my life. Groups of people where everyone's talking. That's an instant, I need to leave the room moment. I also have a coworker whose favorite hobby is angrily telling stories about his personal life to my other boss. I think he uses it to vent his frustrations, and they both clearly enjoy chatting with each other. But my god, he just sounds so angry to the point of almost yelling. Nope, nope. Continuing a date with someone that I realize I have no interest in halfway through. The mere thought of having to talk to people. I can't stand pretending that I frickin' care about anything. I just want to die. Whenever someone says, "You're so good at this, how are you so good?" Please just stop saying that to me already. People who start conversations with the sole intent of saying what's in their head at the time and nothing else. Conversations usually imply some level of listening. When someone starts talking to me about your dumb crap they saw on the news, and then trying to get me to agree with them instead of actually talking about it, I lose all hope for humanity. I just end up smiling and nodding and waiting for it to be over. Parent night or other school functions. I'm an elementary school teacher and I'm pretty okay with interacting with the students because it's like a switch I can flip on and perform during the day. But talking with a room full of adults makes me want to die. It's so nerve-wracking and it makes me all sweaty.
Guys who married bridezillas, what happened after the wedding? My first wife was a bridezilla. During our honeymoon, she realized she was married and the wedding day was history. She wanted the big wedding, which she had, not the actual marriage. The next 2 years were miserable until she finally tapped out. I was young and stupid, and the thought of divorce never crossed my mind. I don't know why it didn't. I guess I just assumed I'd be miserable the rest of my life. When she told me she was leaving, it felt as if the weight of the world was off of my shoulders. On a happy note, her parents were still paying off the wedding when we divorced. That's what happens when you allow your daughter everything she wanted, including 2 wedding dresses. I have a feeling this is how a lot of these stories are gonna go. They wanted the big wedding, and then once it's over, they realize they don't really care so much anymore. One of my coworkers married a bridezilla. I'll try to just hit the bullet points of what happened leading up to, during, and after the wedding, but it's still a lot. The moment he proposed, she lost any interest in any woohoo. According to him, she also basically stopped acting like the woman he fell in love with and started acting like her real self, which was completely crazy. A week after he proposed, she quit her job because her full-time job was now planning the wedding. The wedding was horrible, but I'm getting there. She had a fight with his mother because the bride demanded the groom's mom pay for half the wedding, but get zero input, and wasn't allowed to contribute to the guest list, which was 95% the bride's friends and family. The bride, who was 30 years old, subsequently egged her future mother-in-law's house. When the bride and groom had a fight about the egging, he went to work the next day and she shaved her head and sent him a video of her screaming and sobbing as she buzzed her hair off in the bathroom. I worked with him. He showed me the video when he said he had to leave. I strongly urged him to have her assessed by a psychiatrist. Jump to the wedding. It was in a pool clubhouse in the summer. It was way too small for the 150 plus people they invited. Someone forgot to turn the AC on until after the place was packed. A lifeguard showed up in a swimsuit to turn it on, but it did little given it was already sweltering. 2 rows of chairs in the clubhouse were ribboned off with reserved signs on them, so no one sat in them. They were later occupied by the 6 seated bridesmaids, leaving about a dozen open chairs once the wedding started. The one groomsman stood by the groom and didn't sit. Elderly people were left standing or reduced to sitting on the floor, as there was no way to get to the chairs once the ceremony started. The bride showed up 90 minutes late, having been unhappy with her hair, which I assume was a wig, and makeup, so she took it all off and did it herself. So all the guests are standing there for an hour and a half waiting for her. The groom was literally standing at the altar sweating his butt off in a wool suit in the South's high summer, and was clearly not sure if she would show up. He looked like he felt sick. When the bride showed up, she burst into the clubhouse, marched down the aisle, and snapped at the officiant to hurry up and get started. During the prayer, while the religious groom had his head bowed, she turned to wave at everyone. I don't pray, so I was looking up. Then she told her mother to go get her some water. She drank a bottle of water during the prayer and kept grinning and waving at people in attendance, paying zero mind to her groom in front of her. When the ceremony was over, tables were crammed into the clubhouse and apparently only family and immediate friends of the bride had seats at tables. The rest of us were going to be standing outside during the reception, so I didn't see a dance, a speech, the cake cut, nothing. The food was served outside in the southern US July heat, with bugs everywhere. The bride made the groom go get her food over and over. He meekly stood in line with the other 150 people, until people insisted he go sit and let them get the food. Nope, she told him to get the food, so he said he had to be the one to get her food. She never left her table, never greeted any of her guests. Apparently, they had a massive fight as they were leaving the following day for the honeymoon. The bride laying all the failures of the wedding she planned at him and his mom's feet. She threw his luggage out of the car and tried to drive to the airport by herself. But he had their tickets and jumped on the hood to stop her from driving off in his car. He got fired about a month after the wedding because he kept showing up late, leaving early, and leaving in the middle of the day, usually because she called him with some crisis. 1 year after the wedding, I got a thank you note for my wedding gift, which was signed by just the bride with a note that said, "As you may have heard, Ryan and I have had a bumpy start in our first year as a married couple, and we're separated now. Thanks for the lovely gift. They divorced a couple months later. You know, I know what I was getting into with this thread, but I can't help but just feel bad for all these guys. I married a Groomzilla, bent over backwards to make the wedding as magical as he wanted. I would have been happy in someone's backyard with a potluck. He admitted in couples counseling 7 years later that he never really wanted to marry me, so much as he just wanted a huge show and party. Everyone liked and approved of me, so he wanted them all to see he was making a good choice and be envious. He wanted them to be proud of him. We used up most of the money I got from a car accident settlement. Could have put a down payment on a small house. He asked for a divorce in 2020. They had an expensive $75,000 wedding. After they split up, it turned out the bride never turned in the paperwork to make their marriage legal. The groom didn't even know he wasn't married until he wanted to file for divorce. The bride never returned the gifts either, even though they never really got married. She just lied to everyone about it. I don't know how many people know she never got married. This sounds like it would be illegal in some way, no? My brother married a bridezilla. She yelled at my mother on the day of for asking her where she wanted certain decorations at the reception site. There wasn't a written plan, so my mom had nothing to go off of. Never thanked my parents for financially contributing to the wedding. Accused a bridesmaid of trying to upstage her by getting a spray tan before the wedding. My brother wanted me to be in the wedding party, but she told him to his face that I was too pretty to be in the wedding party and all of her bridesmaids had to be less attractive than her. She stole my sister-in-law's jacket in the middle of the reception. Literally took it right off her back, because one of the bridesmaids was cold. It was a night reception in the spring. The girl should have brought a jacket. The list goes on. Well, they got divorced about a year later because apparently her demanding attitude carried over into the marriage. Needless to say, the rest of my family had a little party when we heard about the divorce. She sounds like a piece of work, but is there literally any compliment more objectively true than being told you're too attractive for the wedding party by a vapid narcissist? Not a bridezilla, but a groomzilla. A friend of my father was remarrying. It was both his and his bride's second time around, both in their early 40s, and an arranged marriage. The guy was an utter groomzilla. He demanded that everything be at top-notch hotels with obscenely expensive catering and hired string quartets and whatnot for the entertainment. Mostly paid out of the bride's family's pocket, I might add. The parties on the night leading up to the main wedding event were opportunity enough for him to make a rather public fool of himself, talking at the top of his voice and showboating the entire time. But the kicker came the next day, when the bride was missing from her own wedding reception. Obviously, it was very odd and conspicuous, and the few relatives from her side made some non-committal excuses for her not feeling well. Turns out, this jerk had divorced the poor woman right after he'd had his wedding night fun. He said that he didn't like her enough, and that's an almost literal quote. So he gave her the divorce papers and that was it. The marriage was officially over before the festivities even ended. That's gotta be close to a record turnaround time, right? But seriously, that guy is a massive jerk. My cousin was married to one. He comes from a very not wealthy area and has become successful himself after moving out of his hometown. His wife was extremely wealthy, even could say excessively. They married after a year of knowing each other, and boy was it a surprise to hear about the wedding plans. They spent over $250,000 on the wedding, including catering by 5 to 7 different restaurants. Their food was from different cultures and cooked in front of you. Think almost hibachi buffet style. They even had servers in tailed suits and white gloves serving Taco Bell after midnight once everyone was drunk. Once they got married, she was spending more money than he could make. She was getting mad because he wasn't making enough, while she wasn't working and they hadn't had any kids. They got divorced, and she gave him the ultimatum of getting his ring back or keeping the dog. He kept the dog. Her sister, a lawyer, helped her file a restraining order on him, and they haven't spoken since. Screw her, but man did he dodge a bullet. $250,000 is an insane amount of money for a wedding. Our guy made the right decision keeping the dog, though. I married a groomzilla. We're talking costume changes between wedding and reception, yelling at the wedding planner, dragged out fights about whether we can add fruit kebabs so people would get enough to eat, everything. There was zero compromise. He made a lot of promises for things I had been wanting after the wedding, and they never materialized, like a beach vacation and such. Turns out, no compromise at the wedding meant no compromise anywhere else, so I left him after 4 years of marriage. Best decision ever. No compromise at the wedding meant no compromise anywhere else is probably about the best way you could sum up this entire thread. A friend of my husband's who he's known since they were kids, so about 20 years now, married a bridezilla. She's evangelical and religion is pretty much her life, and he was agnostic, a nice metalhead geek guy. They asked us to be the best man and woman. Me and my husband are both tattooed, and when we arrived at the wedding, we were his only friends. Everyone in that big wedding was from her, now also his, church. Well, the preacher kept saying to him he had his old life and now his new life, his old friends and now the new friends, yada yada yada. But all the time criticizing his old ways, the authentic way. And everyone kept looking at me and my husband like we were beasts. Worst day ever. She's that kind of person that wants to be an influencer. Every single thing is in her Instagram. Their relationship seems perfect there, but he always seems so unhappy, so apathetic, especially when we used to see him. Always talking about how things are so different, how things are like she wants. Her stories are basically her saying he does nothing right. It's even humiliating. She made him stop talking to us. This last week, he got out of every group we had. He stopped answering my husband, who's very sad that he lost one of his friends. I believe she's the one replying with the few weird messages he does get. That's the bridezilla. It seems very common for the bridezilla to act on social media, but in real life, it's all messy. It honestly sounds like these two were very different from each other when they got married. Like, these two lifestyles don't really mesh together. I feel like he must have known he was going to be giving everything up to marry her. My girlfriend of 10 years is very down to earth and level-headed. We finally decided to get married later this year for a few reasons, and she's feeling a lot of phantom pressure to do things a certain way. It's not like there's an overbearing mom or catty friends applying pressure or expectations. It's just the whole idea is overwhelming and filled to the brim with opportunities to make a decision you might end up regretting later or forever. I've taken a more active role in narrowing down options instead of asking her to pick a perfect solution out of 5 million possible options. It's helped somewhat, but there's still a lot of pressure on her seemingly out of nowhere to make a series of decisions that all depend on the first few big decisions that are weighing heavily on us. All this to say, I can see how this kind of stuff could turn a normal woman into a lunatic. These types of events tend to bring latent family and friend drama to the forefront, and emotions are high before anything even really gets started. My guess is that a lot of bridezillas were actually lovely people who calmed down and returned to being lovely people after the stress of wedding stuff is removed. This is the other side of the coin. Planning a wedding does have a lot involved, and there are a lot of general expectations. It's understandable how a normal person could get overwhelmed. Before reading these comments, I thought a bridezilla was a woman huge and strong enough to be compared to Godzilla, and entered the thread eagerly expecting to read stories about grooms getting lifted and carried off into the sunset on their wedding day. I'm very disappointed. My uncle married one. She had a spending problem, went clubbing in her 40s thinking she was 20, acted like she was better than everyone, couldn't keep friendships, and cheated on my uncle with a man 10 to 15 years her junior. My uncle is remarried and happy now. Sounds like she never quite grew up and just wanted to live her life as a party. That's definitely a red flag. Been married 14 years now. She's definitely a pain in the butt sometimes, but so is everyone else. I'm also pretty laid back, so a lot of decisions I leave to her because I just don't care. If it's a decision I do care about, I make the decision. Without her, I wouldn't have the 3 best kids on earth. She's an amazing mom, and our kids have our best qualities. We have fun all the time. I think she was a bridezilla not because she was a crazy person. It was more about making the moment right for everyone and making it a great memory. She had a relatively rough life with her parents, and there weren't a ton of great memories. I noticed she goes way out of her way to make great memories for the kids, as she's always planning stuff for us to do with them. I'm gonna keep her. I married a bridezilla. In the 18 months we were married, she was such an unfit mother with too many instances to list here that when the divorce was finalized, I got custody of our kid and the kid she had prior to our marriage. Also, she was a blackout drunk and cheated on me with several different men. The final straw was when I had to travel out of state to check on my grandmother. I came back a day early, saw used Marlboros in the ashtray, not her brand, and I don't smoke, and then I heard grunting and groaning in the bedroom. Yep, there she was, and there he was, and there he was. Devil's Triangle. I contacted a divorce lawyer the next day, finalized it as fast as possible. Ding ding ding, we have a winner. My uncle married this lady who was an insane bridezilla and put him into an enormous amount of debt because she wouldn't settle for anything less than her perfect dream wedding. She had the marriage annulled after the fancy honeymoon and said she didn't want to be his wife, but she always wanted to have her dream wedding. Jerk. My cousin was an unbelievable bridezilla. About a year after their horrifying wedding, her husband convinced her to seek help for her mental health. 5 years later, she's in a much better place and they're happy. Just in case anyone wanted a happy story. My girlfriend's former friend was a bridezilla. Didn't smile once at her own wedding because she was too busy freaking out over insignificant details. Although she has a master's degree with unpaid college loans, she's now a permanent stay-at-home mom, an anti-vaxxer, and a conspiracy theorist. She spends her days getting into Facebook beefs with anyone who isn't woke enough. No idea how her husband hasn't gone crazy, cause as far as I know, he's not into any of that. She sounds like exactly the type of person you would expect a stereotypical bridezilla to be. My sister decided to marry a fellow she'd been with for less than 4 months. Second marriage. It was spur of the moment, with less than 1 month notice. Let's all fly across Canada for a lovely East Coast wedding. Flying across Canada is expensive. Anyways, I had just started a new job and it was imperative that I be there at work during her wedding time. Not the slightest option of time off. I would have been let go. She didn't talk to me for over a year. The marriage lasted around a year, if that. She took him for everything. He lost his house, his car, and drank himself out of his job. She even took his dog. Other family members stepped in and gave him his dog back. She's a peach. Single if anyone's looking. My first marriage was to a bridezilla. She got drunk before the ceremony and wouldn't dance because she was too anxious people would make fun of her. She tried bragging to my cousins during the dinner that our wedding was better than theirs. The 4 of us got married in a 2-year span. She invited her ex-boyfriend to the ceremony that I later found out she had been sleeping with both before and after our wedding. She took the money we had received as gifts and were planning on using for a house down payment and spent it on random crap. She had a ton of debt that she kept from me as well. I left her a year after to the day and never looked back. I'm now happily married to a great woman. Obviously, hindsight yada yada, but there were a lot of red flags I should have noticed. Here are some of the big things she did after the wedding. She spent money quicker than she could make it. I ended up having to take on a second job, and I already worked 50 plus hours a week, all just to cover the bills. She started using substances and stopped going to work. She would visit her friends in the evening. Found out later on she was going to her boyfriends. The final straw was when I found out what she was doing with the money. I didn't know at first she was into substances. Online payment of bills weren't as popular when we were married, so I would give her the money to go and pay some during banking hours. One day, I got pulled over and charged with no insurance on my vehicle. Turns out she was taking the money for bills and buying substances. When the notices for no payment would come in the mail, she would hide them or rip them up. I handed her the separation papers on our 1-year anniversary. I, 21-year-old female at the time, married a Groomzilla, 25. I wanted to elope because I didn't like the idea of being stared at by people. He demanded a wedding of 200 plus. He had my parents build a giant gazebo on our farm. Said he'd help pay for building costs. Me and my dad built it by hand with our neighbor. He was always working. Don't get me wrong, he helped a few weekends, but it was a year-long project. Shortly after the wedding, we retired to our hotel, and he didn't want to consummate. I was like, okay, long day, I get it. 3 months into a sexless marriage, I walk into him banging our 60-ish-year-old male neighbor. I opened my bedroom door, saw what was happening, said I was sorry, shut the door, got my dog, and drove home to mommy and daddy a state away. Why did I say I was sorry and not yell? I'll never know. Doctors of Reddit, what's the biggest case of faking it you've ever seen? Taking trauma call during surgery residency, I had a prisoner come in after a fight and claimed he couldn't move or feel his legs. All the CT scans and MRIs were normal, but we would shield his legs so he couldn't see them and poke them with needles and other sharp objects with enough force to cause pain. He never flinched or moved his legs at all. He was diagnosed with SIWORA, which stands for spinal cord injury without radiographic abnormality. He stayed in the hospital for a week, no improvement. Always had one guard with him. One night, they were down in the lobby watching some television, but the guard needed to use the restroom. The patient said, "Where could I possibly go? I'm paralyzed." The guard left him alone for 2 minutes. The patient was last seen sprinting down the road, naked butt cheeks flapping in the breeze. Made it to a city 4 hours away by car before he was caught again. I've never seen anyone fake it so well. Truly playing the long con. Yeah, this guy had a plan and he was seeing it through to the end. Dermatologist here. Patient was convinced she had a melanoma and needed a biopsy and would need to be on workers' comp. I told her it looked like ink from a marker. She demanded a biopsy. I wiped the area off with an alcohol swab and showed her the ink and that there was no spot on her skin anymore. She stormed out, threatening to sue. I'm just glad I cured her melanoma. You truly are a miracle worker, doc. Had a patient come in for a fall who now couldn't move their legs at all. Did a bunch of tests and didn't find anything. The patient was not at all fazed by suddenly being paralyzed, which was the first red flag. Didn't really believe anything was wrong, but the patient was still not moving their legs. My options are to admit for a huge workup or get them to walk. So I update them saying everything is fine, tests are negative, you can go home. Patient gets up, gets dressed, and walks out without a word. So we're not even going to acknowledge the fact that you just completely lied? Not a doctor, but I worked in healthcare for nearly 20 years. While taking a break from the ICU due to it being emotionally draining, I worked in home health for a bit. I had a patient who clearly had Munchausen syndrome. On a daily basis, she would call her insurance to see what things would be covered if she was diagnosed with this or that. She called her doctor's office an average of 5 times during my shift with her. She would report all kinds of non-real symptoms. She pestered the doctors into doing an exploitive laparoscopic surgery. Of course, nothing was found. One day, I walked in and she was rubbing her incisions with rotten cabbage, trying to get it infected. She wasn't seeking pain meds, except to sell. Really, she was just as happy with antibiotics or stool softeners. Anything. As long as they wrote her a prescription and she got to go to the pharmacy where she did a whole song and dance for them too, claiming allergies and reactions. She always increased the exaggeration of her story too. One time, she fluttered her eyes after making sure I was looking and said she lost consciousness in that half a second. She called the doctor and claimed she lost consciousness for 5 minutes. She called the insurance and claimed it was 10 minutes. She called the pharmacy and claimed it was 30 minutes. Then she called 911 and told them she woke up on the floor after losing consciousness for 4 hours. The worst thing about her was she was a mom. Her son was 28 at the time, and by all the stories of his childhood illnesses and her saying how he's severely disabled, I knew she basically screwed up his childhood with Munchausen by proxy. She portrayed him as being severely disabled, and that's why he would never find a wife. I met him. He was healthy and of average intelligence. He wasn't looking for a wife. He was gay, but she refused to accept that. Working with her was so miserable that I took a couple years off from any and all healthcare after that. No, I don't blame you. It sounds like you paid your dues with this woman for a while. We had a patient faking a seizure, so my supervisor told one of us to get the brain needle. The patient made a miraculous and swift recovery without intervention. A young woman, maybe around 18 to 20 years old, went running into a small rural hospital ER pretending to have abdominal pain. Police officer had tagged her going 40 plus kilometers over the speed limit, which was stunt driving as per the new law in Ontario. Impound and license suspension automatic. Cop followed her into the ER and apparently said he'd be waiting for her when she left. Locum staff, such as myself, were housed at a small B&B about 15 minutes away, and the ER had pre-printed orders set to be done before we arrived. When I arrived, she flat out admitted that she just came in because she freaked out and didn't stop. I told her we'd give her 45 minutes to call her parents or family before I booted her. Except BHCG came back positive, and subsequent ultrasounds came back showing extremely early ectopic. The officer figures out something's up when he hears an air ambulance call come in over the radio. She was completely asymptomatic and just worked out that she dodged both charges and a life-threatening issue by accident. It was definitely a WTF moment. She's incredibly lucky she ran away from the police. You don't get to say that often. Pediatric neuropsychologist here. Got a referral for more or less consolidation care. Patient was 13, wheelchair bound, required therapeutic oxygen, seizures, arthritis, musculoskeletal problems, suspected autism, completely nonverbal, severe behavior challenges, the list goes on. He was being followed by at least 8 different specialities. Clearly, none of whom were communicating with each other, and the med list was around 18 prescriptions long, including some incredibly heavy-duty stuff. Opioids, antipsychotics, antiepileptics, that sort of stuff. Got kicked to me after his upteenth ER trip because the ER doctor felt something was off, and he needed someone to look at the whole picture. Factitious disorder by caregiver or Munchausen by proxy. All of the original symptoms were parent-reported, going back to about a year old. It possibly started with a fever-induced seizure in infancy, but this was never witnessed by anyone but mom. She's been telling docs different things. She was convinced her son had all these disorders, told him he was gonna die any day. He got a Make-A-Wish trip, donations, all kinds of things. He was removed from her custody and taken off most of his meds. Within a few weeks, he was out of the wheelchair playing basketball, no oxygen, super talkative and friendly, and no behavior problems. He did have a pretty significant intellectual disability, but there's no way to say if that was organic or the result of the prescription cocktail he had been fed all his life. Hopefully, with some good therapy and a stable home, he can continue to make progress. Some parents just really know how to mess up their kids. Physical therapist here. Working mom comes into the clinic with her infant in a stroller. She's limping like she's got a nail in her foot, wincing in pain and tears in her eyes. She's crying during her visit with the PT. None of us think she's faking it. She limped out of the clinic. I glanced out of the window and saw this woman bounding down the sidewalk, hips swaying, full stride, going places. We were all fools. I guess she was just there for painkillers or something? Whenever we had kids, usually teenagers, playing up their symptoms to extend their hospital stay, we would order them into a healthy lifestyle. Lights out at 9, no screen time for 2 hours before bed, healthy diet chock full of fruits and vegetables, screen time limits, minimum number of laps around the unit per day to get in their exercise. They got better so much faster with our healthy lifestyle tips. My brother was an EMT for 2 years, and he told me this. People will try to use the ambulance as a means for transportation from Fulton to Oswego because the hospital's in Oswego by faking seizures. Sometimes when the head EMT guy was feeling fun and knew the person was faking, he'd say something like, "Man, it's weird that he's having seizures but not peeing himself." Apparently, the person would kind of snap out of it for a second, weigh up the repercussions, then either pee themselves or stop faking. I thought that was hilarious. Sorta along the same idea. Working at a pharmacy, we saw a guy come in to try and get a refill on some pain meds that had no refill. After pleading that his ear really hurt, we told him again we couldn't refill it. One of the other employees saw him step into a side hallway, take a pencil, and jam it forcefully into his ear repeatedly, drawing blood. He calmly left and went to the ER. He came back a few hours later with a prescription for pain meds. Oh, this one really bothers me. This isn't faking. This dude has an addiction and apparently will do whatever it takes to get his pain meds. This patient comes in for back pain with weakness of the legs, gets a full workup with MRI, standard blood work, and then some immunological things to look for stuff like myasthenia gravis. No neurological or immunological explanation for the weakness. Patient is seen by physical therapy and they're of the opinion that the patient is holding back intentionally. Go to see the patient at the end of the day and prep them for discharge. Patient is infuriated that they're being discharged, yelling and screaming about how they aren't better, how they're disappointed in the institution, and blah blah blah. They said one particular thing that still clearly stands out 3 to 4 years later.
I can't believe you're sending me home already. I haven't even told my family I'm here, and now you're gonna send me home before they even have the chance to see me?
My attending and I leave the room to arrange things with the nurses. We go back in and the patient is out of bed and standing up in the middle of the room. Miraculously, the patient is able to walk with zero assistance, when they had so much difficulty walking with assistance over the past 2 days. At that point, they were enraged we went in the room without knocking. They were discharged home after having a conversation regarding abuse of medical services. Had a patient when I was an intern feigning blindness. She would constantly be playing on her smartphone, only furiously trying to hide it when someone from the care team came into her room. The best was when my attending one day strolled past her room and threw his hand up in a highly exaggerated hello wave. She started to throw her arm up too, but caught herself halfway through, then threw her hand back in her lap and pretended to be staring off into nothing. Nurse for an ophthalmologist here. Had a 21-year-old new patient claiming to be completely blind from a sudden and severe glaucoma diagnosis from a previous unknown doctor. Would feel around while walking, tried to keep his eyes rolled back into his head, the whole 9 yards. He said he's a famous YouTube rapper that's now unable to make videos or earn a living. I exclaimed to have heard him before, and very excitedly asked him to search and show me his YouTube channel on my phone so that I could subscribe. He took my phone out of my hand and effortlessly found the YouTube app and typed away in the search bar. Oh, and of course his eyes were back to normal and focused. Come on, man, you're gonna fall for that? One time my roommate, who's an ICU nurse, came to see one of my indoor soccer games. During the game, a player on the other team went down hurt and started screaming in pain and swearing and rolling around while holding his ankle, before he eventually was helped off the field. He then limped over to where the fans sat and watched the rest of the game brooding in silence before he left early. After the game, my roommate told me he was going to go over and see if there was anything he could do to help, until he saw that the guy was limping on the wrong leg. How did no one else notice this? Only the nurse caught on to the fact that the guy's limping on the foot that he hurt? Was told this one by a fellow nurse I used to work with when we had a psych floor. It's not unusual for psych patients to stash things in various orifices. This one woman was convinced she was impregnated by a ghost-like figure, but no one would believe her. So one day, she started complaining of massive pelvic and uterine pain. She called them contractions. So the doctor goes to do an exam. The doctor feels something larger in there, so they prep a table to get the object out, which was quite large. So the wonderful third year helping with the procedure starts hearing this woman complain of contractions and yelling things like, "Should I push? I'm gonna start pushing!" The doctor is trying to work forceps around this woman's parts as to not hurt her. Finally goes, "Got," and as he starts saying it, pulls out a baby doll, head only. The poor med student did the wobble, went all flush and had problems keeping balance and about took a dive. I was told he didn't live that down the whole rotation. I mean, I don't blame the poor kid. In his mind, he just saw a baby's head get ripped off. I once saw a patient who had been faking paralysis of the legs for years, used a wheelchair, and never walked. Old records showed extensive imaging, neurology consults, and other tests that proved the patient had full function of all his extremities. Family and friends were just going along with it, not sure if it was really conversion disorder or if the patient had some secondary gain issue. Not a doctor, but am a UK-based midwife. Had a patient who had been in and out of hospital throughout her pregnancy with episodes of heavy bleeding. This was her 6th baby, so she was a fairly well-known patient in our unit. The issue was no one had ever seen her actively bleeding. She'd call saying that she had bled down the toilet but flushed it. All the examinations we did came back completely normal with mostly no evidence of any bleeding whatsoever. On occasion, during spectrum examinations, we'd see the smallest amount of blood. I was caring for her during a shift where she yet again called to say she was bleeding. I walked into her room and found her jabbing her private area with a sharp object to make herself bleed. She'd been doing it the entire pregnancy. The reason she gave? Because she had 5 noisy children at home, she needed some rest, and knew we wouldn't admit her to the hospital if it wasn't for a good reason. She would do it any time her being discharged home was mentioned. We ended up having to complete a prenatal mental health referral and consult with the safeguarding midwives, as she was putting herself and the baby at risk of serious harm. I understand needing to get away from the kids for a little bit, but this is an extreme. Ophthalmology technician. People pretend to be blind all the time. I go to check their eye pressure with the Tono pen, a device you poke them directly in the eye with, and they go, "What the heck is that thing?" I'm a nurse. We had a guy who had to come in every 3 months to get a medical certificate to say he couldn't work at his retail job due to severe disabling back pain. He was receiving large amounts of insurance money for this condition. After the doctor had done his usual examinations and questions and signed it off, the guy asks the doctor to check his shoulder, which doc does and asks how he injured it. The guy says playing rugby for a competitive team. "Really?" says the doc. "How long have you been playing for them?" Guy's been playing and training the whole time. Doc puts this info on the insurance form. The doc lost it in the staff room laughing. Next week, the patient loses his mind in reception because his insurance has been cancelled. You kinda brought this one on yourself, my friend. Back when I was a nurse, a guy came into the ER for a stomachache. When asking him about history, he randomly mentions a fight with his girlfriend where she left in a tizzy and he fell asleep on the couch. 20 minutes later, when we see the CT, he has a satellite cable remote wrapped in a condom lodged in his rectum. I'm guessing he was intending to frame her. I didn't get to hear the conversation he had with the doctor. I was curious how he was going to explain why she was nice enough to wrap it in the condom. This has gotta be one of the stupidest plans I've ever heard. I'm a nurse, not a doctor. I had a patient who worked in a hospital as a janitor, so he knew enough to fake a bit. He was seeking pain meds, complaining of chest pain and wanting morphine. He was worked up for everything cardiac and was fine. Then he tried to claim GI discomfort when he was being discharged. Cleared again for everything. So he faked chest pain again. Cleared again. Now he's my patient. I'm a new face. He tells me he's having abdominal pain. I call the doctor, knowing this guy's history. He says he'll be up to see him soon. This patient wants a ginger ale, some stomachache. I decided to go to lunch. My coworker comes into the lunchroom disgusted. This guy had taken a dump in a basin and then dumped the ginger ale over it and tried to tell her he had fecal vomiting. He obviously needed meds right now for the pain. I walk into his room and sure enough, a pile of poop in a puddle of ginger ale. I told him I'd have to take away his food and drinks and we'd have to put an NG down. Suddenly, he changed his tune. He admitted to faking it. Why do these people do what they do? ER nurse here. I was bringing a patient back to a room who said he had kidney stones. I had him stop at the bathroom and get a urine sample. Dude comes out with the specimen cup that literally has a piece of concrete in it. Looked him in the eye expecting some sort of joke. He was serious. I threw it away and walked this foolish man back to the waiting room to contemplate his stupidity. When I was a medical student, I worked in the pediatric side of the emergency room, and we would give popsicles to all the kids. One afternoon, an 8-year-old came in with his father, and I asked what was wrong. The kid couldn't remember what he had complained about to his dad, and the dad couldn't remember why he brought his kid in. The kid's mom was a nurse, and she worked at another hospital at the time, but she was the one that would keep track of all these things. Anyway, after a few minutes trying to figure out what was going on, the kid asked, "So can I have my popsicle now?" The kid was 100% healthy. Unfortunately, we reinforced bad behavior and both the kid and the dad subsequently left with popsicles. Years ago, I had a patient who had been rear-ended in an auto accident a few weeks before I saw her. She had a history of lupus. She was decked out in the usual I'm crippled paraphernalia. Crutches, neck brace, elbow braces, wrist braces, knee braces, all of it. And she could barely walk. I saw her a couple of times and she showed no improvement. One Saturday I was on call but had to take a backstreets route to the hospital because of an event taking place on the main thoroughfare. I apparently drove around her neighborhood because, wonders behold, she was wearing old lady spandex power walking down the sidewalk, holding weights in both hands. I didn't call her out. Next week, she was back at the clinic with her I'm crippled get up on again. A few weeks later, I got a subpoena for the deposition, and it all became clear. I'm a surgery resident. When I was on my trauma rotation, we had a patient come in after MVC with question that maybe the patient had seized and that had caused the accident. So he's in the trauma bay and starts shaking. The trauma nurse goes, "Oh, this isn't a real seizure." And the patient stops shaking, sits up, turns to the nurse and yells, "You don't know a thing about me." Prisoner came in with signs and symptoms of a big stroke. At that time, the protocol was to get a non-contrast head CT to rule out a bleed, and then give TPA, a powerful clot-busting drug that's only worth the risk if the benefit is to mitigate a major stroke. So that's what happened. Later in the course, he got a little carried away and started embellishing his story with symptoms that didn't make sense with his stroke diagnosis. And that's how we figured out he was faking it just to get some time away from jail. Can't say I blame him. At least he wasn't trying to escape. He just wanted to get out for a day, it sounds like. Massage therapists of Reddit, what are some of your most awkward or disgusting experiences with clients? Tell me all the weird crap you've dealt with. Then tell me if it's worth it making this career choice. My mother's been a massage therapist for over 20 years. She's in her 50s and she loves it. She massages a lot of elderly people and doesn't mind. She massages a few obese people and doesn't mind. To her, people are people, and she's not easily disgusted. But when people proposition her for sex, she minds. One particularly troubling encounter was when she was massaging a friend's husband, and he thought it would be appropriate to ask for sexual favors. I hope she went and told her friend about that afterwards, cause I'm sure she'd want to know. I had a very eccentric client, which is a nice way of saying creepy. They came into our clinic one day wanting a tui na massage. It's a type of Chinese massage. We usually leave the room to let the client strip down into their underwear before we commence. But with this guy, I had no chance to get away. Before I had time to give him a towel, he dropped his pants to reveal a sparkling blue G-string that barely kept everything in place. The guy was about 58, huge beer gut, gray hair, gold earring, and hairy like Robin Williams. As I started the massage, the guy started to tell me that he worked as an erotic masseuse specializing in body slide massage. This is where the masseuse gets oiled up and rubs his body and genitals all over before screwing the client at the end. The whole time I was massaging him, he kept telling me that I was really good with my hands. He also repeatedly told me how he was good at his job and plugging his business with a hinting tone. It was a very awkward session. Yeah, not the kind of job offer you want while working. I was getting a massage last week, and in the little room next to mine, there was a talkative older gentleman. He was chatting away to his massage therapist. Then it went quiet. After a little while, I heard him whisper, Do you do this for everyone? A large female client wanted focus on her glutes. Needless to say, I was farted on while she was asleep. Her own fart woke her up, and then she accused me of farting because there were trace amounts of fart still in the air. I'm sure it wasn't pleasant at the time, but now you have a funny story to tell. I've had clients ask if they could massage me, specifically my butt, while I was working on them. One woman tried to put her face in my crotch and told me she would love to lick me. For the record, I was wearing yoga pants as I'm also a yoga instructor. Many people are surprised at how strong I am and comment on it and how small my hands are. That's not odd. What was odd was the guy who followed that observation with telling me that I also had moved like a wolverine. Not sure if that's a good or a bad thing. Former massage therapist here. I used to work in the YMCA in my hometown. There was a group of 4 older ladies around their early 50s that all played tennis together, and afterwards took turns getting massaged. At first, it was great. They were mostly doctors' wives, fairly easygoing and generous tippers to boot. But then things took a strange turn. One woman offered me a diamond tennis bracelet if I agreed to switch the order they were massaged in and did her first. I declined the gift but promised to use a rotating schedule in the future. She was fine at first, but slowly became more aggressive. She would beg and bribe me to extend her half hour for 10 or 15 minutes, in spite of her friends waiting. She constantly offered me expensive presents, shopping, home-cooked meals, all kinds of things I was uncomfortable accepting. The more I declined her offers, the weirder and edgier she seemed to get around me. Finally, I guess she got tired of beating around the bush and made an outright advance by grabbing my hand and forcing it onto her breast. I told her I was very flattered, but I wasn't interested in other women this way. She screamed, perfectly in range of all her friends and my coworkers to hear, about how I'd been leading her on for months, and how I didn't deserve any of her time and money. She berated my appearance and education before storming out the door naked and furious. I quit that day, started waiting tables, and never quite worked up the nerve to go back. Sounds like this woman was a little more invested in your relationship than you were. My mom is a massage therapist. She used to work out of our house. She had a studio downstairs where she would have people over for massages. One day, a woman who came over was probably in her late 60s. Oldish, slightly overweight woman. Now, my mom, as is standard procedure, asks this woman to disrobe and get under the covers while my mom waited outside. When she came back in after a few minutes after asking if the woman was done, the woman was standing in the middle of the room completely naked. The woman said, "Honey, I'm sure you've seen more than this in your day." She had not. That's not right. You're intentionally putting your masseuse in an uncomfortable situation. I'm sure they don't want to see any of their clients naked. I do it and I love it. I'm a guy, and I have to say there are some creepy phone calls, but that's about as bad as it gets. One guy asked exactly what kind of massage I did, which is a common precursor to do you do extras, and I clearly told him about Swedish massage. He said, "That's something my partner and I would be interested in," and asked, "And for the ladies, do you do sensual massage?" I find this euphemism so frustrating. It literally doesn't imply what they want to imply, but it's become recognized as a word for sexy time. I said no. He then said, "Could you?" I said, "No." Then follows a common awkward situation where we try and both pretend that he hasn't just asked me for some kind of sexual service in return for money, and finish the conversation as you might otherwise. This conversation and the time a rather lonely elderly gay man told me how much he appreciated having a pretty man take care of him were about the weirdest moments. Admittedly, when Mr. Lonely Gay Guy said that to me, I felt a bit gross, but also internally giggled, blushed, and said, "Aw, he thinks I'm pretty." For a fleeting moment, I considered a life as a wealthy boy toy of an aging thespian. My ticket into the high society of homosexual retirees. Feeling slightly jaded and ashamed of my life built on lies and sexual quid pro quo, but driven by the idea of inheriting his immaculate house and fortune. Then I remembered I was a bit far down the road of life for that change of tact, having married a woman, and I decided I would diminish and remain Galadriel in the West. But the weirdness is worth it. Swedish massage is a very fascinating practice based on Western medical understanding of human physiology. You'll learn words like desquamation and lymphatic. There are perks, like ladies paying you to touch their body. There is admittedly a slightly pervy pleasure when you're massaging someone really attractive, but it's seldom and balanced by your professionalism and the amount of slightly tubby men one deals with. And as a guy, I have a disproportionately high level of men, because women therapists won't see guys. It is great though, because men have more muscle, and that's the fun part for me. Getting deep into a thigh or shoulder and working the bits loose. It's truly the best job ever, though I often come home smelling like people. The absolute worst was a guy started touching himself while I was working on him. I have had one other guy proposition me, and one lady that was such a jerk that I ended the session because of what a jerk she was. I've been a therapist 5 years, and these are the only really awful things that have happened. Daily I help people. Daily I make people feel better. I'm sure that's the majority of the job. Of course there's going to be a couple of weird stories given the field, but I'd like to think for the most part they get to do their job the way they want to do it. I'm just gonna say prolapsed uterus and they could have warned me and leave it right there for you to imagine the gaps. I had to suffer this image being put into my head, so now you guys do too. I just graduated in April and I've seen some things. There was a guy that would come to the campus clinic to get a massage from the students. Well, one day his cyst popped. Warm pus flew 3 feet and hit the curtain. Smelled like death. Oh, and then there was the job interview where it was made clear that their distinguished clients would pay for a little extra. How about a big bowl of nope? I'm a massage therapist, doing medical type work. My clients are all super nice, so not many awkward experiences, but I'll share 2. The first one, I came back to change the sheets after one client had gotten dressed and left, and found that she'd had some diarrhea on my table. Luckily, our laundry service treats all of our linens as biohazards anyway, but yuck. And second, I came into the room after washing my hands and letting my client get undressed, and she realized she hadn't been specific enough about how she'd injured her back. So she got up, stark naked, and proceeded to demonstrate the motion she'd been doing when she hurt herself. I wasn't disgusted, bodies don't scare me, but I definitely felt awkward. That's about it. I love my job. I definitely suggest going into massage therapy if you're compassionate and can handle a good amount of physically demanding work. If you're worried about sexual come-ons, stick to medical settings. If you're worried about bodily fluids and/or smells, go the spa route. My brother is a massage therapist for a side income and has tons of horror stories. One of the strangest ones is a man came into their studio, he shared one with others, and specifically asks for a man. Well, he's left in the room with the typical instructions, undress and get under the sheet. And when my brother comes in, the guy is sitting on a couch, cross-legged, naked as the day he was born. Anyway, weirds out my brother, who apologizes and asks him again to get under the sheet and leaves for about 5 minutes. He comes back and begins the massage. Apparently, this guy had a huge penis tattooed on his back and kept hinting for more. The guy even started slightly pulling the sheet off his butt with his hands, and saying things like, "It's just the 2 of us in here. What happens here stays here. I wouldn't say anything." Basically, all of this unnerved my brother a good bit, who was all too happy when the guy's time was up. But, like a champ, he continued to do massages, although they did add that guy to their watch list. I can only imagine all the stories behind the people on that watch list. I worked as a receptionist for a massage service facility. Every masseuse was licensed and the business was legit, but I guess having an all-Asian staff gave creepers the idea that we provide extra services. One day, a rather large white man requested one of our longest massages, 2-hour Swedish massage. I instructed him to disrobe and lie beneath the bedsheets while his massage therapist prepared for the massage. Hand-wrist stretching, hydrating, that kind of thing. Typical procedure. He seemed like a decent guy, so I wasn't expecting any trouble until the masseuse that had just entered the service room stumbled out backwards shouting profanities and slamming the door. Apparently, he was sitting stark naked at the edge of the bed with his wang out, upright, and at full attention. To make it worse, according to the masseuse, when she walked in and gave him a startled look, he gave her the creepiest smile and jumped off the bed as if to approach her. We threatened to call the police and he left, though he had already paid for his service, so too bad for him. I've been doing massage for 10 years, have worked on several military bases, Sedona and Laughlin. You see some strange tattoos, some really interesting scars, some insane back hair, and smell some pretty nasty feet. If you like helping people and aren't into it for the money, especially in this economy, then it's definitely worth it. That's probably your general experience as a massage therapist. Not a whole lot of creepy stuff necessarily, just some kind of gross stuff. I'm a beauty therapist and do massage too. I once had a girl roughly the same age as me in her 20s come in for a body massage as a present from her boyfriend. Whilst doing the massage, I could see the oil looked weird, like a streaky brownish color, and it smelt weird. Well, the client smelt weird. After the massage, we chatted for a bit and she mentioned she'd spent the morning fake tanning herself. I looked at my hands and they looked like I'd just dipped them in chocolate. So brown. I then had to explain to her that it wasn't the best idea to do that as she'd now be one streaky mess. Tan fail. I know some girls have had creepy guys in for massages in the past, but luckily I haven't. Nothing exciting to tell, I'm afraid. Although, one girl had a guy in for a massage, and when she told him the massage was over, he offered her 21st special extras. She ran off crying. I was still in school and I was giving this guy a massage. Towards the end, he started shifting around a little and acting a bit awkward. I didn't think much of it and just went about finishing up. He'd said it was his first massage. As he exited the room, he got all shifty-eyed and awkward, and seemed a little embarrassed. He didn't want to talk to me. He just paid as quickly as he could and got out of there. I went back to change the sheets and there was a nice little present sitting under the top sheet. A shining little glob. I didn't know what it was, though I had an idea, so I leaned in to sniff it just to be sure. Yup, it's what I thought it was. The worst part? He didn't even tip. He just left something from his tip. That jerk. Why on earth would you smell it? I had a woman that had explosive diarrhea during the treatment. I didn't know what to do, so I just ran out of the room. That's probably the best thing you could have done. Female therapist here, and surprisingly, nothing too creepy or weird so far. I had this one client while still in school who really wanted extra focus work on his toes of all things. After spending my time on his toes, he wanted glute work. He pulled his tight shorty shorts down and bared his hairy bum. Not exactly what I was expecting, being so innocent and new to the field. Needless to say, I pulled his britches right back up. Since then, I've had a few clients make sexual references or try to give me hugs afterwards. No blatant, here's my penis, you know what to do with it. There have been a lot of boners though. Every day, all day. All I see is a clock and boners. Alas, I do love my job. It's easy, but hard work at the same time. Very rewarding. I think it depends on where you work, what area of town, and who you're employed by. But I personally love what I do. Yeah, at the end of the day, if this is the field you're looking to get into, just be careful where you work and who you work with more than anything else, assuming you're trying to avoid these situations. A client came in unable to fully stand upright due to low back pain. I told her that I would likely need to work in the hip area, so she should probably remove her underwear. She then said, "Oh, well, I had an accident earlier today and I threw away my panties so I would be more comfortable leaving my pants on." I did the massage anyway, although my coworkers were telling me to refuse to do it. But I felt like if you've already pooped your pants that day, you'd probably feel even worse if someone refused to touch you because of it. However, at the time, I was assuming that she'd actually cleaned herself post-liquid poop. I massaged her back and did compressions on her glutes and hamstrings with her pants on, all while the smell of excrement wafted in my face. Then I noticed at the end of the massage that she had brown stains along the cuff of her pants. She gave me a nice tip, but I had to thoroughly bleach the entire room and sanitize everything after she left. But nothing can sanitize my brain. Physical therapist here, but we do massages a lot. Here's a few quick ones. A girl on her period without a tampon or pad who stunk like heck from body odor messed up the towel we put out for the patients. Next, a woman in her late 40s. I sent her into the room and said that I would follow after taking a short break to get something to drink. Upon entering the room, I found her completely naked doing the sexy look. I turned around and left. In a clinic for chronic pain therapy, a woman accused me of sexual abuse because I didn't want to give her a happy ending. Luckily, she confessed to the psychologist that she made it up. A patient with a polytrauma and a fixature extern fled naked out of the 3rd floor. We didn't know how to manage this, or even why he was running. And many more stories I just can't remember right now or would take too long to explain. But even those bad stories can't take down the positive effects of the job. Grateful people everywhere. My sister is a massage therapist, and one day while working at a very nice upscale spa, she noticed that the guy she was working on would not stay still. He kept wriggling around on the table and she kept having to ask him if he was okay and comfortable. He said he was fine and she would continue, only to have it go on. Finally, the massage is over and she leaves the room to let him get dressed. She waits a few minutes, then knocks on the door to see if he wants water or if he's ready to go pay. He tells her he's done and to come on in, and she walks into him touching himself on her massage table. Apparently, he'd been grinding on the table / trying to get some friction / touch himself, or who knows, while she was working on him. She had taken a break from massage for a while, but she's now back working at the same place, and she's already had people ask her for a happy ending. Needless to say, she's not really crazy about the profession anymore. That's just it. I hate to say it, but at the end of the day, this kind of thing is gonna happen because there are creeps. If it's not something you can handle, then I don't blame you. Massage therapist here. There are some pretty unfortunate clients. Ones that smell, ones that are really fat, ones that are really skinny. Massaging bone is harder than massaging fat. Awkward ones, really hairy ones, horny ones who leave stains on the sheets. But my most off-putting types of clients are the ones, usually older, with lots of dead skin, that once you start to massage them and do the motions with your hands, their skin, combined with the oil or cream, makes for a disgusting mixture that sticks to your hands and onto their skin. And you're just smearing it everywhere, and trying to fling it aside so you can get through the rest of the hour. That's the worst for me. This wasn't even something I had considered until this point, but ugh. Male massage therapist here. Back when I was in school, I was doing a clinic at the school. It was a pretty chill scene. A lot of us developed regulars and got into a routine. My nights were Tuesday nights, and one day I came in and noticed I had a whole list of my regulars in, including this older man that had been coming to the school for years and getting massages. Every week since starting, he would request me. Now, the school says they can't always get you the massage therapist you want, but they'll try. Every week, like clockwork, he would be my last client. At first, he was nice and social. Then, over the weeks, his questions got extremely personal, and despite my trying to avoid personal questions, he would keep asking. As well, over time, every time I would get him to turn over, he would be packing a major rager. This was usually the point where questions got more personal. One night, I finally had enough, as he began asking if I would ever give a special ending for a large tip. I calmly declined and approached one of my instructors the next day. She just nodded her head and offered to change my night I worked. Kinda feel like it needs to be a little more addressed than that, but hey, at least she got you out of there.
What fact are you just tired of explaining to people? That I'm not lonely or sad, I just like to spend time by myself. That being deaf really means I can't hear you at all. All the shouting doesn't help me to hear you. The difference between type 1 and type 2 diabetes? Any type of diet, plants, or hocus-pocus voodoo isn't going to cure my cancer. It's a chromosome switch, so unless they can switch my chromosomes back into the right places, it's not happening. That reminds me of how, Steve Jobs died. Apparently he was a real believer in alternative medicine, and then he, got a transplant of an organ or something that he needed that he should have done at the very beginning, but then he wasted so much time on, alternative medicines that when he got the transplant, it just meant nothing. Correlation doesn't equal causation. I'm in IT. That does not mean I can single-handedly make a game or large-scale software. At the same time, I also cannot hack the Pentagon or release encrypted files from another hacker. Also, side note, while I was reinstalling Windows for you, I did not break your toaster and radio on opposite sides of the house and have no idea how to repair them or your microwave. Okay, thanks, bye. Going up a tax bracket doesn't result in a pay cut. That having the money to buy something doesn't mean you can afford it. Oh boy, is that a good one, and oh boy, is that one that I'd hear from my mom a lot when I wanted toys as a kid. As a speech and language therapist, I'm responsible for somebody's safe swallow to prevent aspiration, pneumonia, or choking. There is more to my profession than teaching a child to stop stuttering. Gifts must be reported to the IRS if they are over 17 grand. Gifts over 12.92 million in the giver's lifetime are taxable, and the giver has to pay the tax. They tax gifts to avoid rich people dodging estate taxes by giving everything away before they die. ADHD is real. Adults can have it too, and it's not cured by a belt, just trying or cutting back on caffeine and sugar. It's actually very debilitating at times and is the primary contributor to a lot of problems that adults with it struggle with. It's extremely hard to find the help you need past a certain age because even the medical industry has a terrible understanding of adult ADHD. And no, not everyone is a little bit ADHD. Parts of the brain are literally underdeveloped due to lagging behind while developing. It literally prevents me from being able to redirect my attention and tune out background noises. It makes my default mode network, the part of the brain that chatters when you are at rest not doing anything, incessantly chatter in my head all day, every day. It makes the part of my brain responsible for inhibiting emotions or thoughts extremely difficult. It's mentally exhausting. It prevents the part of my brain responsible for motivation from functioning correctly. It's not laziness. It's literally my brain not being able to communicate with itself properly to get me to take action. And yes, it literally affects my mood and my displays of emotions. It's not bipolar. I just can't regulate how I show normal emotions effectively. If I blow up at you when you make me angry, it's not anger problems. I literally can't hold myself back unless I am getting the help I need to manage the ADHD. And yes, that means stimulant substances for me. No, it's not an illegal substance. Yes, it functions similar to that, but it calms me down because I am chronically understimulated and my brain takes over seeking stimulation, hyperactivity, chatter, daydreaming, etc. Stimulants put me on even footing with everyone else. I likely try harder than you every day with everything I do because I start the race with my feet tied and a mile behind the starting line. So stop telling me that I just don't try hard enough. And please educate yourself. ADHD is the most well-researched and studied disorder on Earth, and too many people don't believe it exists. No, it wasn't invented in the 70s by a man who said he made it up. There are over 200-year-old medical journals detailing it. The grandfather of medicine, Hippocrates, has writings describing patients that are believed to be the earliest recorded instances of ADHD, and the treatment he gave them line up with herbs, vitamins, and minerals that tend to help ADHD the most. And that's from the 4th century BC. It's not a made-up problem from 50 years ago. That all checks out. I've got ADHD. It does suck some days, but it also affects people wildly differently. That awful poor planning on their part does not constitute an emergency on mine. That most recycling ends up in the landfill. You are not being environmentally friendly just because you recycle. Reducing and reusing are much, much better for the environment. Recycling is the last resort. Only one small step up from garbage. The importance of privacy, why governments and companies should not spy on us unless when the people whose data is stolen are not citizens of their country. And together with the above, not because someone posts things on the internet and has a public life, does it give others the right to interfere in their private life. That just because I'm black does not mean that I'm an expert or the go-to guy on all things African American. Seriously, Along those lines, I can like a woman who's not black because of qualities she has that have nothing to do with her skin color or ethnic background, or not like a black woman because of the same things. If she's from Mumbai and would actually listen to me argue with someone why Professor X could use his mental blast to take out a Mark II Sentinel and get me another beer instead of head for the door, why does it matter what her hair color is or where her people are from? She likes me enough to put up with my BS. Why should I look for someone that you think I should be with to make you happy with who should be with whom? Just saying. This sounds like a rather personal matter. I'm sorry that probably your mother is maybe racist and unable to see that you've maybe made a actual connection with someone. I'm not Chinese. I don't speak Vietnamese or Chinese. Yes, I'm Irish. 18 years of reinforced go to college and you'll get a good job growing up has led to an entire generation of adults who are on average more educated than prior generations when the number of jobs that would actually require those educations have not really increased in any significant number. So now, more roles that don't actually need the education can still ask for it and get candidates with that education requirement applying because they can't get anything else. Add on the fact that tuition rates have been increasing at a much higher rate than inflation since at least the 80s, while Uncle Sam happily foots the upfront costs and you wind up with a generation of people with significant debt making less than their expected income that can't afford to pay it off. Don't forget to add in that public schools don't, or at least didn't about 15 years ago when I graduated, have any mandatory classes to teach about loans in general, student loans, interest, etc. So kids signed up for these loans with only a very vague idea of what they were signing up for. And finally, even if Biden's debt forgiveness passes, which I hope it does, as it will definitely help people, it will still do nothing to address the underlying issue and actually solve any problem. It will just put a band-aid over the issue for another year. Now, I by no means have a horse in the American political race, and you're the one who brought it up, but I just thought I'd ask. How's Vote Blue No Matter Who working out for you? That you are responsible for your own actions. Just because something offends you doesn't mean it's gotta go. The McDonald's coffee lawsuit lady was very justified in winning her case. Longitude and latitude and GPS and how it simply would not work if the earth was flat. That you don't have to be white to be racist. There are non-white racists too. To add to that, 1, there's no reverse racism, it's just racism. And 2, just because you're black doesn't mean you're not racist towards black people. That's literally the point of characters like Uncle Ruckus. Stop setting yourself up for failure because you demand perfection. Actually accomplishing something to a B+ level is infinitely better than having not done it. Can't clean the kitchen until it's spotless under a microscope? Cool. Load up the dishwasher until it's full and run it. Way better than living in filth. Can't stick to a 5-day-a-week workout and super healthy diet? Fine. Do twice a week and cut out the 3 worst foods and you'll be massively ahead of where you were. Basically, incremental improvements in your life will eventually lead to larger scale improvements in your life. I once heard that apparently you need to stick to something for about 30 days in a row before you just start doing it automatically with ease. The vast majority of religious believers cringe just as hard as you do and wish the loud extremist minority would go away and shut up just like you. It's a shame that so many people assume first which religion and second that these discussions don't already take place within the communities of these religions. They do. The difference is neither side is smart enough to realize that screaming your belief into others' faces will never actually work. It only makes you the savage you think you are disagreeing with. And it really sucks that I need to extrapolate on this, because people still want to assume the worst and shout their beliefs into another's face. I mean, there are morally reprehensible people in any kind of group you can name, social, religious, whatever, but the fact of the matter is the world would be a whole lot better if people would just come out and say, yes, there are morally reprehensible people in our groups and we all need to work together to call those people out and hopefully make the world a better place, and we can all maybe learn to tolerate each other just a little bit more than we have been lately. Censoring speech is the first step towards oppression of all society. That unlikely things do happen, such as people getting lucky or someone bragging about something unique. It appears as if lots of people stubbornly live under a rock and refuse to accept the fact that everyone has a life of their own. The 8 billion people on this planet do not exist as carbon copies of your life. That you can disagree with someone and still be friends. You can also have different political beliefs and be friends. Opinions are not facts. That intention does not negate impact. That touching a baby animal won't make the parents reject it. It's an old wives' tale / myth to keep children from messing with wild baby animals. I still see so many people argue about this. I'm not sure if it is true or not. Some people say it is, some people say it isn't. I mean, the people that say it is true actually give examples. Feminism is equality and against bias towards genders. It doesn't mean to hate men. That is the opposite of the definition of feminism. I am Sikh, not Muslim. Those are your dog's nipples. Yes, male dogs have nipples. The laws of supply and demand apply to labor, so you can't import millions of people without driving wages down. Han shot first. It's been ages since I saw the original cut of Star Wars, and it's so weird that they change it with each iteration that they decide to pump out or whatever, but it makes him a more interesting character if he shoots first, rather than waiting to be attacked. Micro-pigs aren't real. It's just a starved pot-belly pig. Gonna get buried, but just chipping in, there is a massive difference to listening and waiting your turn to talk. Most people are waiting for their turn to talk, interrupt soon as a thought comes into their mind, or only latch onto one small thing that they heard and ignore the rest. The worst people are those who just try to drown out your voice by talking louder than anyone else. Listening is a valuable skill. Please learn to listen. That innocent until proven guilty is a legal concept. It means while being tried in a court of law, the judge or jury need to be unbiased and believe the person is innocent until the burden of proof is met. It does not mean the person is actually innocent. If I see someone commit a crime, I don't have to say they are innocent until convicted. I know they did it. A person can absolutely be guilty, but the legal burden was not met. And again, that does not mean they should be treated as though they did not do it outside of the justice system. Just because I'm old doesn't mean I'm out of touch. My son's trans and I've supported his transition. Also came out as bisexual at the age of 58. A lot of us old folks want to see the change you kids are going to make in the world. Politics isn't simple like you think it is. There are no simple answers. That all dating apps are designed to get money from you and that they don't care if you find anyone. They prey on those who are weak, who think spending money will help them find dates. Dating apps have ruined people's self-esteem and dating in general. It's true, a large swath of society needs to readjust and, try and take part in actual human contact to find partners again. If you regularly use dating apps, that's fine, but honestly, it doesn't really prepare you for, conversational skills in person or anything like that, which are very, very critical. Every generation has its share of greedy buttholes and grifters. Things aren't going to magically get better when the boomers all die. That the 2020 election was fair and not stolen. Electric cars won't save us from climate change, and we've been duped by car manufacturers. We need walkable cities yesterday. That just because the research study reports a statistic does not mean it is generalizable to the entire population. Most research studies are done on a population in a given area. The area then are typically randomized to get a sample from that population. That means that if a researcher is doing a study and uses one specific country, state, job, place, or whatever, they are only studying that specific population, which implies that if you were to do that study on a different population in a different place, there could be very different results based on the different demographics of that specific population. For example, if you were to do a study on the average political beliefs of people in the southern states, you cannot imply that the results would be the same as the average political beliefs of people in the northern states. Most people who perform research or are knowledgeable and have taken a class in statistics are aware of this. However, I know many people who just raffle off a statistic that clearly supports their specific opinion or belief, without looking at all the other research that may have disproven that said finding, or they don't realize that the one statistic is only specific to one population.
Nuclear energy is a waste of time and a colossal waste of money.
Pollution from coal power kills more people every day than nuclear has in its entire history. That life isn't a bunch of dichotomies and extremes. I can consider Donald Trump to be the worst president in U.S. history and still not vote for or even like Joe Biden. I can recognize that Maryland's SB 0001 is a dumb law and still not be a long-range killing device lover. I can prefer to eat my pizza without pineapples and still not think that pepperoni is the only acceptable pizza topping. This is literally the best answer in this entire goddamn thread. My god, this topic is a bit of a down and I have to comment on every now and then because a lot of this stuff is just opinion-based, or they're only saying 1 to maybe 8 word answers that I don't really want to extrapolate on. That anxiety is not just all in your head. Yes, there is a damn rule that stops everybody from playing basketball, or more accurately, there's no rule that allows it, and basketball rules are a list of what you can do. Anything not included is prohibited.
The ducks at the park are free.
Because my dad is a math teacher doesn't make me automatically good at maths.
So, my name is Maurice, and ever since Madagascar came out, I keep having to explain to people that Mort is the one with the foot fetish, not Maurice. Your migraine headache is not a migraine. When I have a migraine, my head doesn't just hurt. My pupils dilate so uncontrollably, I effectively go blind, vomit uncontrollably, piercing neck pain, and occasionally I hallucinate. Yeah, I cannot stress enough how, different a migraine is to a headache. It's true. Frankenstein was the goddamn doctor! There is a difference between an excuse and an explanation. Also, that most times effect carries more weight than intent. That first part, right? So I'll mess up in some way and I'll be like, yeah, totally my fault. I did this and that. And they'll be like, no, stop making excuses. What are you talking about? I'm taking the blame. I'm just explaining how it happened. The phrase is, I couldn't care less. Saying, I could care less opposes the point you are trying to make. That not every evergreen tree is a pine tree. Some of them are spruce, cedar, fir, or even tamaracks. Homeless and unhoused can't just get a job. There's so many factors that are unaddressed in that ignorance. Atheism is not Satanism. If I don't believe in your imaginary friend, why would I believe in your imaginary enemy? The left lane is for passing, not cruising. The president doesn't control the gas prices. That is absolutely true. And yet the decisions made by an incompetent, quote-unquote, leader of the free world can ripple and change the world exponentially. Frankly, I just wish it was never always down to some stupid two-party system. I'm gay myself. I get stupid questions, like if I have ever tried being straight, or insecure women who think I want their men, or insecure men who think I want them, etc. Rinse and repeat. It's not the most interesting aspect of who I am. In fact, I don't think it's interesting at all. I can't decorate. I don't know crap about fashion. I'm just a regular guy who happens to occasionally date other guys. Currently single. I'm fine with that. Now, just because the fact doesn't agree with your political statement doesn't make it any less true. Doesn't matter what side of the spectrum you are on. Just because I have ADHD doesn't mean I can't sit still for an extended period of time. ADHD affects different people differently. Well, it certainly makes it difficult for me to sit still for an extended period of time. The Dark Side of the Moon is a Pink Floyd album. The moon no more has a dark side than the earth does. It has days and nights, 2 weeks long. It does have a far side. The entire medical profession, or at least the 98th percentile, misunderstands addiction. Alcoholism, gambling, sex, illegal substances, overeating, even religion. Any of them. Doesn't matter. The medical profession thinks the reason the patients are addicted is, number one, they don't understand the harm they're doing to their bodies and society. If we could just explain it to them, they'd stop. No, we understand. We're under siege with pamphlets, after-school specials, news programs, medical personnel telling us, plus a billion advertisements, MADD, and such on the harm it causes. Number two, it's just a lack of willpower. No, it's not a lack of willpower. Lots of very high-functioning people in other aspects of their lives, heads of industry, CEOs of corporations, and very successful sports, football people also suffer from addiction. Number three, they're living the dream already and just want to experiment to see how much better life can be. No, sorry, not that one either. Well, maybe if you're 16 to 18 and life is wonderful, that's true, but it's not true for anyone over 30 to 90 years old. For most of the people with addiction problems, life sucks beyond the imagining, and they just want to have the tiniest bit of control to dull the pain to a manageable level. Dr. Sarah.
Bob, I've explained all the advantages and disadvantages to you. I really think you ought to agree to the skin grafts to fix your burns. Do you not understand the harm that could happen if we don't deal with this? Do you not have the willpower to survive the operation and recovery?
Bob. No, Dr. Sarah, that's not my problem. My problem is that I still live in the house and the frickin' house is still on fire. If we go through the pain and expense of the skin graft, 5 minutes later, I'll be right back in the same circumstances that put me here in the first place. And if by some miracle you can convince Dr. Sarah that your life won't ever change to get you out of the fire, they fall back on the,
well, then why are you whining about it? Why don't you do something to get out of the fire?
Because, Dr. Sarah, my grandfather has Alzheimer's. My mother has stage 4 inoperable pancreatic cancer. My son, little Timmy, is severely autistic. And daughter, Betty Sue, has incurable Parkinson's. Which of those 4 problems can you fix for me, Doc, to reduce the stress and pain in my life to a manageable level? The entire medical profession doesn't understand that addiction isn't about the thing you're addicted to or the effect it has on you or other people's lives, it's usually about medicating unsolvable problems to a bearable level, and until everyone understands the problem, we have no hope of solving it. Why forums like these make me really angry when they just become a moan fest for people with insecurities, faux depression, and other mental disorders they want the whole world to know about. This person is totally right, but, everyone needs some method of getting their frustrations out. Both political parties in the US are just as corrupt and self-serving. Most, if not all, high-ranking politicians have lost touch with what it is to be the average human being. They pander to us, put us against each other, and pretend the other party is the enemy and they truly want to make life better for us. They don't give a crap about us. They think they're royalty and we're all peasants. When American politics comes up, I always think about the Stampy the Elephant episode of The Simpsons where it goes on a rampage and it goes to the Republic Convention Center and there are banners hung up all saying, "We want what's worse for everyone. We're just plain evil." And then it goes to the Democrat Convention Center and it says, "We hate life and ourselves and we can't govern." This one was honestly so hard to goddamn sift through because it was all just political opinions or people complaining about their chronic health issues. I was hoping for more scientific facts or myths and stuff that people come up with.
Redditors who work in the ER, what's the scariest, dumbest, or weirdest thing someone has come in for? Had a lady come in for shortness of breath, began to place an oxygen mask on her, and she yells, "I'm allergic to oxygen," and pulls the mask off. I heard the doctor laugh behind the curtain. Maybe that's why she had shortness of breath? Morbidly obese guy came in for lower right quadrant pain. I lifted up his gut and found his lost wallet. Solved 2 problems at once. 20-year-old male came in for stomach pains. Said he was hungry and hadn't eaten in 2 days. Maybe you should try a sandwich. I have a male cousin who landed himself in the ER because he thought that instead of a condom, he could put something tightly around his male appendage and it would force everything to stay inside. Unfortunately, getting it off posed a problem and he ultimately wound up in the ER with a zip tie around his male appendage. His nickname has been Zippy for 5 years now. So, did it work? My friend worked in ER. She had an obese man come in complaining of a rash under his gut. Upon close examination, they found several splinters. When asked, the man casually replied, "Oh, that must have been from the love board." So the crew had to ask for details. Apparently, the couple had to use a board to pry the man's gut up to get to his business for lovemaking activities. Well, there's an image in my mind I'll never lose. A girl came in saying she was miscarrying, claimed 27 pregnancies and 0 live births. Says that in the last 2 years since she went on birth control to help regulate her periods, she's had a miscarriage every month. We had to explain to her that she was experiencing regular periods. This is why you need to pay attention in health class. My aunt is a nurse and this is her story. 2 extremely drunk men come in. One of them fell down the stairs and somehow got glass in his eye. They had pulled out the glass and sealed the gash in his eye with super glue. They had to soak the eye in acetone to get it open. That's terrifying. I'm an x-ray tech and the hospital I used to work at had a lot of homeless people come in. This one man came in and there was an order to x-ray both his feet. As soon as I got to the hallway with his room, there was a nasty smell. I got to his room, opened the door, and almost puked. He was soaking his feet in water and it was the worst thing I have ever smelled in my life. His skin was peeling off and getting stuck to the x-ray board. I had to stop a couple times, but I kept my poker face. One case that really freaked me out was a guy that came in that was around my age, mid-20s. He was having severe pain in his shoulder, but claimed he didn't injure it. He gets taken back and gets x-rays done and finds out his body is absolutely riddled with cancer. He was given 1 year to live. The family's reaction to the news was so heartbreaking to witness and something I'll never forget. A number of things come to mind, but top 3 without thinking. 1. Man with a 10-inch cucumber in his rectum. Didn't mention said cucumber until the MD noticed a bump on his stomach. Still didn't say anything until we got a CT result. Number 2. Older man came in with a vibrator in his rectum. Wife couldn't get it out and refused to come with him. Number 3. Younger male came in with priapism. Urologist was called in to drain it. One of the most bloody, horrifying things I've ever seen. I saw him again 3 days later for the same thing. I honestly don't know what a priapism is, and I'm not Googling it. My mom used to work in an ER. When patients came in, she was the one who took their insurance, asked about their symptoms, took their vitals, and things like that. One day, she's entering paperwork for a woman whom I think came in for injuries to her hands, but I don't quite remember. Mom's taking her information, and one of the questions is the patient's occupation. The woman says, "Oh, I'm a stripper. I work for Dinty Moore." Mom responds that she had no idea Dinty Moore hired strippers. The woman says, "No, I'm a stripper," and gestures emphatically in the air with her bleeding hands. Turns out she strips the meat off of cowtails. That's apparently what the meat is in Dinty Moore beef stew, cowtail. I was shadowing in the ER once and this big white lady came in with this massive bruise around her lower stomach area. The doc asked what happened and she responded, "My horse kicked me in my pooter," and I just bit my lip and turned around to force myself to not immediately bust out laughing. Had a car crash through our ambulance bay, action movie style. The entire car was well within the building when it finally stopped. It was a 16-year-old kid carrying his 14-year-old brother who had been shot in the abdomen over some gang stuff. Many people had just vacated that area seconds earlier because there was a CPR that came in, and they were all in the trauma room working on that. If they hadn't been, then there would have been a lot of injuries. I used to work in the accident and emergency department in our city hospital. Without a doubt, the worst thing I ever dealt with was the police and social services bringing in a 2-year-old who had been immediately removed from his home after a child protection visit. The parents had stubbed out lit cigarettes on the child's eyes, on his actual eyeballs. He had the most horrific injuries, both old and new. I'll never forget prepping the child for surgery to have his eyes removed. The fact that any human could do this to another, especially a child and their own flesh and blood, is the scariest thing ever for me. Those people should be buried under the prison. Honestly, that's just awful. So we're going to take a hard 180 here and go back to something funny. Guy came in with a salt shaker lodged in his butt, said he was changing a light bulb, then somehow fell onto it. How do they always fall onto it? My sister had a patient who was interested in having her clitoris pierced but was afraid of the pain. Curious, she affixed a super strong magnet on top of and below the clitoris but couldn't remove them. By the time she got to the hospital, her tissue was essentially dead. The doctor had to scrape the magnets off as there was no other way to remove them. I'm a man and was born with all requisite parts, so you know just how serious this is when I say that story made my clitoris hurt. One time the news was playing on the TVs in the waiting rooms. The anchor mentioned a man shot in a gang-related fight who later died from his injuries. Suddenly, my parents hear screaming and crying in the other room. It was the family of the guy who got shot. They had not been informed yet. Oh, that's terrible. How is the news finding out before the parents who are in the waiting room? Come on, guys. I had a guy who put a flare gun between his legs, I guess pretending it was his thing, and fired it. 3rd-degree burns to the groin are not fun. Probably the dumbest one I've had was a husband and wife who rode in an ambulance together, both clearly drug-seeking. For whatever reason, they were placed in rooms across the hall from each other and kept yelling back and forth about what drugs they were getting. The ambulance was initially called for the wife who had fallen downstairs. No injuries visible or on x-rays. The husband rode in with them and checked in, claiming the wife had fallen into him and taken them both to the ground. The husband's only injury was where he said his his feet had tangled in the steps. There was no bruising, swelling, abrasions, nothing. But he had clearly just manually pulled out 5 of his toenails. They were not contiguous toes and it involved both feet, just the nails. Emergency medicine is the daily interface in the process of natural selection. So it takes something truly stupid or crazy to shock me these days. Here's a couple highlights from me. Had a guy come in with a plastic hanger, the hook part, stuck in his cornhole. As it went in, it snapped and broke away from the body of the hanger. Next, the 50-year-old dude who came in with generalized abdominal pain said he had no idea what was going on. Super nice guy, talkative, very friendly. We do an abdomen acute x-ray and all you see is a massive set of batteries floating in his colon. Yep, giant dildo lodged way too far in. Off to the OR he went. Lastly, the nice couple who came in after a vigorous boning session because she broke his thing. One interventional radiology study later, where they inject dye into his urethra to test for patency, and the dye wouldn't advance, showing a stricture in the urethra. Off to the OR he went. One of the stranger complaints I've heard as a resident. I had a 19-year-old guy come into the emergency department on the night shift on 4/20 this year. His complaint was that he got high and he decided he should touch himself and his urethra felt harder than normal. Not his thing, his urethra. I got to the room to assess him and he was in the bathroom peeing. His poor girlfriend was sitting in the corner with her head in her hands out of embarrassment. He got back from the bathroom, stood in the doorway and said, "You know, I feel better now. I think I'm just gonna go home." And then he turned around and walked out. So wait, he just had to pee? I used to be an EMT, and one time we got called to a house in the middle of the night for a patient with belly pain. We get to his house and he's bent over a chair in extreme pain. We get him in the ambulance and start taking him to the ER. The whole drive he's letting out tiny farts that are deadly, also yelling that he just needs to fart. Can't we give him something to make him fart? The ER doc asks us if there's a possibility of a foreign body issue, and I say that I didn't check. The doctor sends him to the CT scanner where he lets rip a fart that echoed. He felt better and left the ER. They had to close the scanner to air it out. You know what? I appreciate that. I wouldn't want to be the next patient walking into that place. I have 2 friends that are nurses in ER. Friend A said that there was a guy who went in because he had a pickle stuck in his butt. Friend B said that there was a guy who went in because he had a pickle jar up his butt. Will everyone stop putting things up their butt? I had a guy walk in completely impaled with a 4x4 wood post. He was drinking and working on his roof when he fell off. His buddy got a chainsaw, cut the bottom off the post, and somehow the impaled guy stood in the back of the pickup truck for the ride to the ER. He walked in the reception area and said, "Hey everybody, I hope you don't mind if I cut in line a bit. This seems quite serious," and promptly passed out. He survived. I worked in an ER for a little over 2 years and as an EMT running 911 calls for another 2. I have plenty of stories, but this one's pretty good. So these 2 20-ish-year-old girls come in and they're lovers. Apparently they had been fooling around and one girl stuck a bottle of hand sanitizer in the other's butt. The bottle was about the same size as a shampoo bottle. Well, it got stuck, so they came in to have it removed. The doctor was able to pry it out of her butt and he threw the bottle in the trash. The girls were discharged and the girl's nurse, who we'll call Steven, and myself walk in to clean the room for the next patient. Steven says to me, "Hey, check this," reaches into the trash and pulls out the offending bottle of hand sanitizer with his bare hands. He squeezes a huge dollop of the gel in his palms and rubs his hands together, laughing hysterically. That was one of the weirdest. Also, once in medical school, I was doing a clinical at a very small 3-bedroom ER in a very rural town, and this giant fat lady accidentally burned her left breast off trying to pour a giant pot of boiling pine sol on the floor. First, the whole hand sanitizer thing, I get that you're cleaning it with the hand sanitizer after, but it's just gross. Second, burnt off? A colleague told me this one. Man came in with a major rager that wouldn't go away. Claims he hadn't taken any drugs, but I have no idea if that's true or not. Turns out he woke up with it, then went to work for a full day before coming to emergency to get checked out. I honestly don't know what happened after that. I don't work in ER, but in a hospital. Back in West Virginia, girls used to come in frequently for just a pregnancy test. Not like they sell them in the dollar store or anything. My absolute favorite was a 23-year-old who came in at like 3 a.m. because their sunburn was itchy. There was also a guy who had a baseball-sized festering stinky sore on the top of his head. He had had it for over a year and was just wearing a baseball cap and ignoring it. You could smell him from the hallway. A dude shot some kind of injectable Mexican Viagra into his thing so he could have some fun with his girlfriend. Turns out he basically totaled his junk. Urology told us that it was never gonna work again. Best part was, he had a wife who he had to explain this to. Finding out that some old dude with a part of his intestine hanging out of his abdomen that drips out poop all the time, and who's unable to get a hard-on without shoving a needle into his business, is somehow married and has a girlfriend while I'm still single as hell, was quite a realization. Well, if it makes you feel any better, he's probably not going to have either for long. So my brother works in the ER. A guy came in the middle of the night with a carrot stuck in his butt. He said he was walking in his garden and fell. Another was a couple who came separately to the ER at night. The girl had a heavily bruised head or something like that, and the guy had a crooked thing. Apparently, while the girl was giving the guy a little bit of fun, she had a seizure, her jaw clenched, and the guy panicked and hit her with something. The situation with the couple sounds awful in so many ways. My brother had 2 varsity football players, rivals from rich AAAs no less, come in with fractured arms, shoulders, and concussions. They actually had to choose between getting them out of their pads and physically restraining them when their screaming alerted one another that they were both in the same ER. Both of them had functioning legs and both were in cleats. There were stitches for staff afterwards. Don't you guys have other stuff to worry about in this moment besides your school rivalry? Come on. My aunt said it was incredibly common for people to come in complaining about terrible stomach pains only to be told that they had a, well, buttload of poop that they just needed to get out. I worked in ER billing, not the ER, but this story actually makes me incredibly angry. I had a less than 10-year-old kid's chart with codes for nausea, vomiting, and a broken rib. So I, being Snoopy and having time to waste, opened up the nurse's notes instead of just entering the info. Turns out the kid swallowed his toothpaste after brushing instead of spitting it out. Mom of the Year freaked out and gave the kid the Heimlich, to the point of breaking her own son's rib. An honorable mention goes to the lady who came in with her workers' comp insurance info ready to go for a laceration, which is pretty common. But in the section for laceration repair, the nurse had angrily scribbled through dermabond and sutures and whatnot to handwrite tiny band-aid in the box. Yeah, this lady went to the ER and wasted a whole bunch of people's time for a paper cut. My godmother was a surgical tech, and the best weird stories all involve things stuck up people's butts. Bottles of Windex, shaving cream cans, tubes for gerbils. Did you know putting live gerbils in your butt was a thing? I didn't know that. The worst part was half of the patients she saw for the "I shouldn't have put that in my butt" were repeat offenders. Then there was the older patient who called her in because he couldn't find his appendage. Turns out he had a ton of foreskin and couldn't pee. Mom had to glove up and use a tongue depressor to uncover the head of his business so he could pee. The ER is full of crazy stuff like this. While I was sitting in a waiting room, a man comes in, maybe 50 to 60 years old, goes up to the counter and tells the lady, I don't know if this is cause for concern or not, but I went to bed on Tuesday night and woke up today. It was Saturday morning, 3 days later. He was told to have a seat and I was out of there soon after, but I've always wondered what the story was behind that one. My curiosity's been piqued here too. Yeah, I'd be going to the hospital too. Please give me an answer to what just happened. A guy came to the ER with an arrow through his head. We thought he was wearing one of those Halloween props, but no, it was real. Watching the neurosurgeons trying to maintain composure when examining the patient was priceless. He went straight to surgery and, from what I understand, did very well. Yeah, I'm sure the surgeons don't have to deal with something quite like this very often. At the time, I was working as a transporter in the radiology department. We shuttle patients in the building to and from tests. I get a page to pick up a patient from our green zone in the ER, non-emergent. I walk into the nursing unit and start looking for the nurse. They see me and get that weird smile on their face. The type of smile in healthcare that makes you worry about what type of patient you're going to be picking up. I walk into the patient's room, introduce myself, and then explain we're off to x-ray. The patient is a very unassuming 20-something-year-old male, non-belligerent, and answers my identification questions very calmly. If anything, he just looks slightly red-faced. I ask him if he's able to walk, and he explains that he's having stomach issues and really would prefer not to. No big deal. I have him get his legs on the stretcher they use as beds in the room and wheel him on over to x-ray. Get him in the room, close the door, and go to fetch the techs to take the images. Now, our x-ray staff is full of seasoned techs with 10+ years of experience on average each. The tech looks at the order and tells me to wait around since it won't be long. Alright, no problem. The tech comes back from the exam room, super quiet about 6 minutes later with a slight smirk. She waves the other techs over to a computer in the back room, away from the patient, chuckles, and pulls the images she just took to be fixed up. Two of the younger female techs bolt away from the computer, hands to mouth, and slam the door. One of the techs whistles, and the older female techs, almost in unison, go, "Well, that could cause an abdomen complaint." Very visible in the rectal cavity was a large toy. Long story short, the patient told the tech that he had a new girlfriend and she wanted to try something new. Little do most people realize that it gets to be like a vacuum to get things out of there, and up it went. 5 hours later, he was released after it was removed, the old-fashioned way. Ladies and gentlemen, this entire video has been a PSA. Don't stick stuff up your butt.
Boys, be completely honest. What makes a girl go from a 10 out of 10 to a 1 out of 10 instantly? Was on a first date once with what seemed like a sweet girl, and she then bragged to me how she and her best friends would go to clubs and hit on ugly guys to lead them on, then laugh at them for thinking they had a chance. She was actually proud of this. Constantly complaining about everything and everything. There has to be something you enjoy. That, or never taking responsibility for your own faults and always having to blame someone else for it. My last boyfriend did this, my last boyfriend did that. Well, damn, girl, why don't you go back to your last boyfriend then?
Fellow men, please, you gotta stop doing such nice things for your girls. It makes the rest of us look bad when we can't exactly keep up with the standard.
I'm joking, of course. It absolutely sucks to be constantly compared to someone else that you are not. Mine is the same as another earlier comment. Had been seeing a smoking hot woman. Looked like a Robert Palmer girl. Then she kicked my cat. What was funny was Bip the cat then stalked and attacked her by leaping from a chair and latching onto her arm. You didn't mess with Bip the cat. He was my bro. 1. Physical violence. 2. Infidelity. 3. Illegal substance abuse. 4. Scientology. 5. Needless cruelty. Treating restaurant staff badly, dishonesty, manipulative behavior. I was seeing someone much more attractive than anyone I've ever dated before. She was pretty chill and interesting, and on our third date, we went to my favorite restaurant and she was rude to the staff. I was so embarrassed that not only did I break up with her, I went back to the restaurant afterwards to apologize. Service work sucks enough without someone being awful. I'm a little mad and embarrassed now, a year later, thinking about that awful date. You know what? I'd probably break up with them too. If that's your favorite restaurant and you know the staff, that would be super embarrassing. I'd be mortified. If they feel the need to do a TikTok dance in the middle of busy public areas. 1. Playing on the phone while having an in-person conversation. 2. Littering. 3. Being a crappy parent. No hobbies. I don't want someone who wants me to entertain them. I want someone who has their own life and their own friends and doesn't feel abandoned if I want to spend time on my own or going out with my own friends. Yeah, I gotta hard agree on that one. If someone doesn't have any friends or hobbies or anything like that to preoccupy their own time and they're constantly just like, no, I need you for company and entertainment and everything because I have no one, it can be really unhealthy for a relationship. Had a girl once who basically assumed that not constantly texting was akin to no interest at all. Any time after the conversation would naturally go stale, or after a pause in replies, I would get a, "What are you up to?" or what's up? And of course, I'd just be honest and say, browsing Reddit, haha. Like, there's only so many ways you can make one's downtime be interesting for a conversation's sake. Ironically enough, that was one of the many factors that did contribute to me losing interest in her. It is exhausting being someone's sole source of happiness and entertainment. I was in love with a girl when I was a teen. I was smitten. She was a 10 out of 10. She had a cat. One day, it made her mad, and she grabbed the cat and hurled it against the wall. I instantly despised her from there on. Since she lived close, I also stole said cat a few weeks later. She didn't deserve Muffin. I renamed him afterward. I don't think she ever noticed. I didn't talk to her anymore. Had a date a few weeks ago. We agreed to meet at a local restaurant that has 2 locations. She wanted to go to the closer one by the highway. To be fair, I was about 3 or 4 minutes late, but I walked in and she wasn't there. She actually went to the wrong one, but she got mad at me for it. I attempted to salvage the date and we agreed to order takeout and meet at her place. The address she gave me was wrong. She lived at Street Place, and the address she told me was Street Drive, which are about 15 minutes away from each other. She's messaging me about how impatient she's getting the whole time I'm trying to decipher where I'm supposed to go. I don't text and drive, and she got upset that I wasn't responding to her. So 1 gets upset with you for their mistake. 2 gets upset with you for their mistake. 3 gets mad at you that you aren't endangering yourself and others by texting and driving. One time I dated this girl I met from Tinder. We went on adventures like hiking and rollerblading, and it was getting a little more serious. We slept together after the 3rd date, and I wanted to see her again the next day after we both worked because I fall easily and become like monogamous after our sex. So we go to work, and afterward we decide to go to the bar with some of my friends. I wanted to introduce her to them and kind of flex, show her off a bit. We get there, and I swear to God, when she met my friend Jesse, she completely ignored me for the rest of the night and left with him. They ended up getting together and split after a few months, and she had the gall to text me to hang out again after. I think I'm still emotionally scarred from that. She was perfect with just the 2 of us, and then she had zero loyalty to me in a social setting. To be fair, I never communicated that I wanted us to be exclusive, but I still felt betrayed by both of them. That is now my biggest flag I look for. Yeah, buddy, Jesse is clearly not a friend. And to be absolutely honest, if I met a woman who then went on to try and flirt and have sex with my friends afterwards, I would be like, nope, you're a problem. Get the hell out of here. Girls who think using an Android phone is a deal breaker. Saying really mean stuff about people they just hung out with. Inability to be accountable or apologize, being rude to service industry folk, no self-awareness, generally being a spoiled or narcissistic person. Overly obsessed with the devil's lettuce. I don't care if people want to have a smoke to wind down at the end of a workday, but if it's your only hobby and topic of conversation, it gets boring real fast. She continually tells me throughout the date that I'm small enough that she could probably bench press me. It happened. She wouldn't stop repeating it. It got real annoying real fast. I was picturing the pig from Duckman saying that. I can't remember his... Corn-fed. Anyway, just a personal thing. Is anyone else like really tired of the simping for like muscular women or like muscular characters in fiction and stuff? With the whole like, oh, break me like you're baited, I am the Batman, mommy, please. It's just so incredibly cringe. Being dumb as a brick. If she doesn't know what she's talking about and likes to argue a lot. The princess attitude in general, but most specifically when it comes to finances. Don't get me wrong, I want to buy/do nice things for my girlfriend, but I hate doing things like that because they are expected of me. I want to do them because I want to do them and make people I care about happy. The second I get, you can't afford me vibes, I am out. We probably don't have much in common anyway, and I want a partner, not an extra expense. Life is hard enough without a constant attitude and headache when they don't get everything they want. Acting malicious towards the elders, animals, or children. Victim mentality. Someone who doesn't take responsibility for her own mistakes. 0 out of 10 when the individual must have a phone in hand in order to showcase everything we're doing whilst doing it. Under the guise of sharing. Put down your phone when you're with another human being. Everything that was on the web will still be there when you return to it. And all the new stuff? Well, that'll be there too. I too hate that. Am I guilty of it sometimes because, well, you know, a lot of my work is online and whatnot? Yes, but it's becoming more of a generational issue. When she tries to make me believe that all of her exes were abusive, deadbeats, cheaters, and man-children, and she had absolutely no role in her past relationships falling apart. I mean, in all fairness, just about anyone can do that. Bad hygiene, i.e. bad breath, bad body odor, dirty fingernails. When they just trauma dump on you relatively quickly after meeting, I get it, and I want to be emotionally available, but sometimes it's just too much too soon. When she turns out to be actually just 3 kids in a trench coat. I know that's just an old joke in general with a bunch of kids pretending to be an adult man or woman or whatever, but I can't help but think, like, are they specifically referencing BoJack Horseman? Unapologetic alcoholism. I can't hang with a woman who regularly passes out drunk at 9 p.m. and then goes to work at 6 a.m., even if she's totally functional. If they use my gender as a weapon against me, like, why don't you act like a man? Or, man up and do it. Or, a real man would be able to. I have fortunately not experienced this directed at me by a date or girlfriend, but I have heard women say this about other guys. Screw that. Screw you for saying that. I'm part of a group that conducts research on psychology of men and masculinity. I know exactly how far this goes to keeping men trapped in the worst versions of masculinity and masculine behavior. These statements that are aimed at hurting men are just the worst kind of manipulative, awful behaviors, and most people don't even realize how bad it is. But it's like I've seen too much. I know how much it affects things at a societal level, not to mention how personally insulting it is. A vegan who looks down on and actively attacks non-vegans. Just for context, I'm vegetarian. It was hard enough for me to become vegetarian after 20 years of shoving chicken tenders and sushi down my gullet. Went on a date with a 10 out of 10 girl to a casual dining restaurant, and I dared to have cheese in my food. She scolded me, publicly raised her voice and everything. People looked at us to see what the fuss was about. The rest of the conversation, her body language consisted of judgment and eye rolls. Mind you, this was the first date. She still asked me if I wanted to go back to her place that night. It was a big nope. Oh my God, you cannot control what someone else wants to put in their body as much as you'd like to. You just can't. Unless, of course, I guess that person is killing themselves, literally, with the amount of crap that they're shoveling down their gullet, in which case, if it's not that, you're probably just a butt of a human being, or a control freak. Materialism, luxury brands, inability to have a philosophical or abstract conversation. Being a litter bug. When she says anything along the lines of, my presence is a present. Cigarettes. Emotional immaturity, inability to properly communicate her problems or feelings, inability to take accountability and remediate bad behavior or actions, narcissism, and all those fun dark triad traits, inability to take constructive criticism, the list goes on. 1. Star signs. Just don't. 2. Posting multiple selfies a day on social media. I hate myself too much to be with someone that narcissistic. 3. Live, love, laugh, merchandise. Basic. 4. Loves drinking. Personal reason. I'm a recovering alcoholic who's currently sober. 5. Likes having sex with people who aren't me. I'm just a monogamous person. Sue me. 6. Treat their family like crap. Different if it's with abusive family members. 7. Overspending on luxury items. I'm a simple man and a thrifty woman like my GF are a turn on. She finds bargains like bloodhounds find bodies. 8. Highly extroverted. I'm highly introverted. I can't be around people of any gender with that much social energy. 9. Overly touchy. Even in a platonic way, just a personal space thing. 10. Persecution complex. Just shows a lack of accountability when their crappy lives are everyone else's fault. It's 2023, sort your crap out, nobody's stopping you. 11. Born and raised in a religious cult. Another personal one for me, long story. 12. Ridiculously long acrylic nails. Other than getting in the way of wearing gloves for a dirty job, or the sound they make when they hit solid objects, I really have no other reason. I really like my back scratchies, but not when they draw blood. 13. Upspeak. Goes both genders. Basically, just a sign that your personality is undeveloped. Sorry if a lot of that makes me sound like a douche, but they asked for honesty and I honestly sat down for like 20 minutes to think about all of this. Honestly, astrology is up there. Not like a mild interest or anything, but if you make real decisions based off it and really believe, honestly, the same kind of goes for any spiritual or religious stuff, but the people I know only do astrology. Probably the exact same things that take a guy from a 10 to a 1. Just being a crappy person pretty much destroys physical attractiveness regardless of gender. Yeah, I do agree with this person. It's just that people decided, it's gonna be a boys topic. Yeah, get the boys in here. Whipping out a bigger Johnson than mine. Silent treatment and emotional manipulation. Grow up and talk about your feelings. But talk, not scream or yell when it's advantageous, but silent treatment when it's not. Take 5, have a breath, and come back and talk.
Racism, size queen, and serious substance abuse. Ignorance. Smoking.
Smoking. On the surface, smoking and those fake nails. I cannot express how much I hate fake nails. Inside, aggressive tendencies, infidelity, lying, arrogance, and ignorance. So everyone here is saying smoking, but I do wonder if they consider vaping to be the same thing, because I know so many people who are like, oh, smoking and vaping, it's not the same thing. It's nothing alike. And it's like, yeah, no, it's the same thing. Personally, I don't really give a crap. Narcissism. Oh, mate, I'm sorry to say, but narcissism is like a freaking epidemic nowadays. Treating others like crap, lacks any form of empathy or any human decency whatsoever, manipulator, is a cheater, hates animals, dogs, cats, etc., displays narcissistic tendencies, being too self-centered / egotistical to the point you constantly put others down to feel better, continues to smoke / vape, just a preference since I don't like to surround myself with people who could give me lung cancer, is a far right-winger, yeah, no thanks. Went on a date with a girl about 8 or 9 years ago, not necessarily a 10 out of 10, but I was interested. Until she asked how much money I made. At the time, it wasn't much, maybe $40K, but she made it very clear that her 5-year plan was to marry a guy that makes good money, have a kid or 2, and be a stay-at-home mom. She was a pediatric nurse making $100K by herself. She was willing to give that up just so she could stay at home as a housewife / mom. Last I checked, she's still single. When they're gorgeous, but arrogant about it. Dated a girl that always talked down on other women or criticized their appearance. Even if we were just watching a TV show, I had to hear her dissect exactly which aspects of which female character's face she didn't like. Ugh. Nothing. If she's really a 10 out of 10 and is willing to settle for little old me, then as far as I'm concerned, I'll overlook the whole serial killer thing. I mean, she's a 10, right? Who am I to judge? No amount of pretty is worth 1 ounce of drama. Women who throw food or drink containers out of the car. You know, I totally get it. It's relevant to what your principles are, what you respect, what you don't respect, your likes and dislikes, whatever. But a lot of these, have really not even been relevant to gender or anything. I was really expecting, like, right off the bat, if she treats me like crap and then blames her period or something like that. That is something that is only relevant to women. She didn't like dogs, particularly my Labrador, objecting to him being inside the house and sleeping at the foot of my bed on the floor. Said it was either him or her sleeping outside. I gave her a blanket to keep warm. Constantly talking about other people's business or regularly saying bad things about people when they are not around. I understand a little gossip here and there, but it is repulsive to me when someone constantly talks about someone else's life in a harsh or judgmental way. Main character syndrome, turning every interaction into something about themselves. Announcing that they strive to become an influencer. Talking about other guys' peckers and past SX lives. Biggest turnoff for me. I keep my past in the past and I don't talk about my experiences with other women to them. Keep it classy. Septum piercings. I completely get that one. Septum piercings are such a hit or miss look depending on the person. Realistically, nothing. Every single person who has weighed in on this has lied to you. Once you breach a certain level of hot, basically, anything goes. You'll ignore as many red flags as you need. You'll start making excuses for behaviors you despise and make excuses for why you've done so. Desire drives people to every compromise you can think of, and we're all capable of doing horrible things to ourselves for someone we think deserves it. You know, personally, I actually do agree with this one. I have seen people fall over themselves for a pretty face and just go against the things that, as far as I knew about them, they believed quite strongly in. But then pretty lady walks in. Whenever a really pretty lady talks to me and is very clear that she knows how pretty she is and she thinks she can basically get me to say or do whatever she wants, it immediately turns me off, to be honest, because I don't know, I hate giving things to people who expect it. And yes, that does in fact include gratification. Bad manners. Being a Disney adult. Assuming I can read their mind. If you can't handle me at my worst, then you sure as hell don't deserve me at my best. Ooh, I hate that too. I hate that so goddamn much. Everything about that saying I despise. Telling stories about how she completely ruined someone's day in a personal and targeted way for minorly inconveniencing her in the course of doing their goddamn job. No, I am not impressed at how petty you are prepared to be to someone who made a minor mistake. If she's that hot, nothing could do it instantly, short of witnessing her murder someone. Instead, it will be a gradual process as the brain starts doing the thinking again.
Any variation of the you should already know / I shouldn't have to tell you why. I'm not a psychic. I'm not here to play a goddamn guessing game. If you're incapable of having a rational, grown-up conversation about your feelings, I'm out. Played that game too many times and I'm sick of it.
One word replies. When I was on dating apps, I saw that a bunch where it'd be like, I love engaging good conversation. And it's like you attempt to have a conversation with them about something, but they don't do anything to actually move the conversation along or expand upon it. They just use one word replies. Yeah, I agree with that. It's infuriating. Constantly throwing pity parties. Not a dude, but I am bi/pan. So number 1, hard illegal substances. Number 2, cheating. Number 3, putting the toilet paper roll on backwards. Don't tell me there isn't a right way, because there absolutely is. Number 4, saying things like, I'm not like other girls, or girls just don't like me for some reason. I get along better with guys.
Crystals and horoscopes.
I think I've actually seen too many people poo-poo on like astrology or tarot. Like, I don't put much stock in it. I know how to read a tarot and stuff like that. It's just a fun thing to do. I think people probably think that the people who actually like that stuff take it more seriously than they actually do. And if they do take it that seriously, then yeah, I kind of get being a bit annoyed by it.
Breathing with their mouth open.
Ghetto talk / slang. I was dating this girl for a while until one date while we were driving back from the restaurant, she opened a chocolate bar and threw the paper through the window. Getting hit with a frying pan? That one does indeed suck.
Herpes.
When they act like they're doing you a favor by letting you have sex with them.
When she pees on your floor and vomits in your bed.
Being with a chick that was a 10 when I was 19 only lasted 6 months because she always told me to open up to her and be emotional. Then when I went through some hard times and finally opened up and she started making fun of me and calling me a lady's nether regions and whatnot. Knew she was mentally unstable from then on. Once we broke up, she did the old I tried to self-delete myself because I can't live without you. Psychopath. Too much makeup and wearing revealing clothes all the time. I want a girl who is proud of their natural beauty. Fake trendy accent. I still get accused of that every once in a blue moon. No sense of humor.
Burps and farts.
Bare feet on car dashboard. I imagine this person did not enjoy Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Nonetheless, I agree.
Doctors of Reddit, what's your most surprising, I can't believe I'm having this conversation with an adult story? Paramedic here. Was driving with my partner and patient was in the back. Patient was fine. Patient's skeezy boyfriend was riding in the front with me and apparently saw a golden opportunity to ask a question that had obviously been on his mind for some time.
So, when cats and dogs eat grass, that means they have cancer, right?
No. No, it does not. Made for an awkwardly silent ride the rest of the way. Where did this guy hear that? I've never heard that before. Well, it looks like she's about 30 days pregnant. Congrats! How can she be pregnant? She's only around her brother. Well, they actually don't follow the same moral code as you or I. I'm a veterinarian, by the way. Thank you for the clarification there. Not a doctor yet, but I'm an ER tech for about 2 years now. Mom comes in with her baby plus 2 more older kids. Complains that the baby hasn't pooped in a while and won't stop crying. As I'm settling them in with one of the nurses, the baby is bawling, like opera singer lungs bawling. Suddenly, Mom whips out a white plastic shopping bag and sticks an end in the kid's mouth and says, "This is the only way she stops crying." Nurse and I share a look and immediately order an emergency x-ray on the kid's stomach. Turns out she had ingested a good amount of these bags and it was blocking up in her stomach. Big deal. Potentially life-threatening. When we confront the mom about her baby feeding habits, her only words of defense are, "Well, I checked all over the bag and I couldn't find anything on it that said non-edible." This woman's a potential danger to her kids. She has 2 older kids, meaning she was probably doing this with them too before. I told a patient that the 30 plus cups of coffee he was drinking every day could possibly be the reason of his chief complaints of anxiety and insomnia. He said he wasn't willing to give this up or try decaf. That's an insane amount of caffeine intake. Like, that's not healthy for multiple reasons. When I was an internal medicine resident, I came across a very nice 50-year-old Dominican lady. She was well-mannered, but one could tell she wasn't the sharpest tool in the shed. As I was prepping her chart for our first visit, I noticed that she'd been seen by every single digestive disease MD in our hospital system. Not only that, she'd had every single procedure in the book, ranging from endoscopies up both holes and culminating in an exploratory laparotomy. You're opened up to basically look inside you when we have no clue what's going on. All of this because for years she'd had one single complaint. She reported severe gnawing pain in her stomach. At this point, I should mention that she was Spanish speaking only. Not only that, she had a very heavy Dominican accent, and I was the first Hispanic doctor to ever see her. My first language is Spanish, and even I had difficulty understanding her. So she comes in, and after exchanging some first-time pleasantries, I politely ask her how she's doing. Sure enough, although she was smiling and said she felt well, she pointed at her belly and said it was biting again and asked for the cream to kill it. At this point, I got intrigued. Her medication list only mentioned a cream used for herpes breakouts. The previous fellow only mentioned in his notes that in every single visit, she only asked for the cream and nothing else. When I asked what she meant by the biting and what she intended to do with the cream, she very calmly tells me she intends to stick the cream up her butt in order to kill the bird living inside her. After delving more deeply into her story, it turns out she didn't have a medical condition. Ever since she was a little girl, she believed that after eating a whole quail egg, the bird had spawned inside her and gnawed away at her insides whenever she was hungry. After a short visit to psych, she was diagnosed with a somatic type delusional disorder. No amount of medication or psychotherapy will cure her, but she was still a fully functional mother of two who paid her taxes and had 2 part-time jobs. I reached out to every digestive disease doctor in our hospital system once more to make sure she never receives an inappropriate invasive intervention. I've been following her for 3 years now, and she's as happy as one can be, considering she has a bird living inside her. Why wasn't a translator brought in long before? Why did it take her going through every single doctor and a range of surgeries to finally find someone who spoke Spanish? While in dental school, my friend pulled out several bombed out teeth on an adult male. After the procedure was finished and post-op instructions were given, the man asked,
So, when should I expect my new teeth to grow in?
He was serious. My significant other is a med student. He helped to diagnose a 40-year-old woman who finally sought out a doctor after having open, festering wounds on her entire torso for over a year. The open wounds only appeared after more than a year of painful, visible lumps on her breasts. She had never sought treatment prior to this. My significant other had to inform her that her entire body was riddled with cancer, that there was no treatment to help her, and that she would be dead very soon. Her sister, who was there the entire time, began loudly proclaiming what a shame it was that nothing could ever have been done, and that hopefully someday we would be able to detect cancer sooner. My significant other watched the doctor explain that pretty much any other woman in the country would have gotten effective treatment at the first sign of the lumps. This was during Breast Cancer Awareness Month. Guys, if something's wrong, just get checked. Don't put it off for a year. You never know what you're dealing with. Better safe than sorry. As a veterinarian, I had a 10-minute conversation with an owner explaining which side was the dog's left side. It's the left side. The left. I saw a patient who was concerned that she was still lactating, despite the fact that she had stopped breastfeeding her twins 2 years ago. She said, "Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night and find my husband sucking on them. He says he's trying to drain the milk for me." I had to explain to her that breastfeeding her husband will lead to continued lactation. Okay, this one's just creepy. Medical assistant to a cataract surgeon here. If you sleep with your contact lenses in long enough, they will fuse to your eyes and you'll need to go to surgery to have them removed. Yes, you can go blind from this. For the love of God, don't sleep with your contact lenses in. Thank you for the PSA and horrifying imagery. Got placed during a rotation in the orthopedic floor of a big hospital in a rural area in Southern California. I was doing my rounds and saw a patient out of bed and walking around the floor following a knee replacement. She had a cane in her hand that she was carrying as a soldier would a rifle. I asked what she was doing and what she thought the cane was for. She replied she thought the cane was for pushing people out of her way since she's now handicapped. I mean, I guess that's one way to use it. I'm a pharmacist, but the comment still relates. Had a lady call in complaining that her husband's Viagra wasn't working. I then went on to explain to the patient's wife that in order for the medication to work, the patient needed some sort of stimulation. The lady just screamed aloud, "Me?" and then hung up the phone. Still my favorite Viagra story. The fact that you have multiple Viagra stories to choose from makes me want to sit down and have a conversation. My friend is a student doctor and is on placement at a small town's doctor office. She had a 70-ish-year-old woman come in with complaints of a small but painless growth that was visible at the back of her throat. Turns out it took her 70 years to notice her uvula. Yeah, that's been there the whole time. Client brings in her dog for a tick she tried to burn off. Looking, I see it's a nipple and tell her this. She says, "But he's a boy, how can he have nipples?" I say, "Ma'am, your husband has nipples." Blank stare, then light bulb moment for her. Not a doctor, but I regularly have people come in for eye examinations because when I take my glasses off, things are blurry. Often, these aren't passing comments during the exam, but the main reason for their visit to the clinic. Patient comes into ER, 19-year-old male. I'm getting his history. Why are you here today? Every morning I wake up and my stomach hurts. How long has it been hurting? All my life? Well, what's different today that made you come here? My girlfriend doesn't think it's normal. More questions. Exam by ER physician, followed by lab tests. The abdominal pain always goes away after he eats. Always. He wakes up hungry. He thinks it's pain. I don't know what to say to this one. Just eat food? During residency in an urban northeastern USA city, I was in a clinic. A very pleasant 50-something lady came in for a physical. Everything was going fine when she casually asks if there's any new vaccines out. She was up to date with everything, so I asked if she had any specific concerns. She was casually asking to see if she could vaccinate her gay adult son against homosexuality. Very nice, always had a smile on her face, even when I broke the news to her. My mom was the head nurse at a clinic here in Houston in the 80s. She worked for an old World War II doctor that had gone into private practice as an old-school general practitioner when he returned back to the States. Well, one afternoon she told me that they had a patient come in that was running a high fever and was complaining of pain in her pelvic area. My mom also tells me that there was a stench coming from the woman's lap that could only be described as enough to gag a maggot off a meat wagon. She begins to interview the patient, who told her that her and her boyfriend had been sexually active and that she has been in pain since. She thought that the woman may have contracted an STD and asked her to undress and wait for the doctor to examine her. The doctor arrives and closes the door, only to reopen it a few seconds later, mentioning about the need for fresh air. The doctor noticed that there was a discharge and began to question the patient about her sex life. Was it protected, not protected, things like that. According to my mom, the patient told her, "No doc, we always use a rubber." The doctor looked down, then noticed there was a small rubber band extending from the woman's private area. The doctor reached in with his gloved hand and pulled it out. What came next can only be described as a magician pulling the cloth out of someone's mouth. One rubber band after another came out over the course of the next 10 minutes. Finally, once they were all removed, the doctor had the talk with the woman about sex education, and that rubber bands were not a successful contraceptive, and not what they meant by wearing a rubber. That is just horrible in so many ways. Not a doctor, but a dental hygienist. I had to explain that brushing your teeth with Comet, the cleaner, was not a good way to clean your teeth to a 40-year-old woman. I also had to tell a woman that was painting her teeth with white fingernail polish that was a bad idea. A 32-year-old grown man asked me if the hot spells he was experiencing at night meant he was going through menopause. My mother helps the Amish get dental care. One Amish woman complained that she needed new dentures. When asked why she thought so, she replied, "Well, I've lost weight, and you know that when you lose weight, you lose it in your gums first." Doctors and dentists, if you're looking for a community to serve, the Amish can truly use your help. I could write a book about the things I've seen. Why would you think it would be the gums? It's just such a weird and random place. I was a newly minted graduate with fresh and optimistic views on my life as a doctor. Second week in came this old lady and her very dysfunctional family. They would argue and complain about everything, from the food, the nurses they didn't like, and every single medical decision we made. She was very, very sick, so her management was just as complicated. She had several children, and they all didn't like one another and would not talk to one another. Each time, we would have to explain a long update to every single one of them, because
They're entitled to hear it from a doctor.
one of these stories being sitting down and explaining why you don't give Gatorade as an IV drip. They didn't understand why we were giving salt water to her. The conversation with her son went something like this.
Look, she likes Gatorade. She's drinking it, so why can't you give it to her through her drip?
We explain why, and the son frowns.
But it's isotonic.
We explain again.
Yes, but Gatorade has more electrolytes.
We explain again.
Saltwater just seems to be too cheap. Can't you give her something else closer to Gatorade that has electrolytes?
This continues for 2 hours. Wash and repeat every day during her admission. Afterwards, I told my fiance. He opened up a scene from Idiocracy on YouTube, and I just sat there with my mouth open for a while. Yes, you drink Gatorade. You don't inject it directly into the bloodstream. Two very different things. While on dermatological rotation, a Middle Eastern patient saw me with what she described as some funny itching growth on her butt crack. Some quick investigation revealed it to be a severe case of genital warts. I explained the diagnosis and that it was an STD, until she shockingly assured that she was still a virgin. Now, virginity is a big issue for young Muslim women, or perhaps their families even more. But apparently that doesn't cover other types of sex, and therefore no birth control in the form of, say, condoms was needed. EMT here. I had a grown adult trying to explain to me that someone else pooped his pants. Got called out for finger pain at a homeless shelter at 2 a.m. We get there and the guy jumps in the truck with very mild swelling to the tip of his right index finger. Here's how the conversation went. Me. So what happened?
Yeah, I smoked some stuff and then I fell asleep in my bunk and I woke up next to my bunk and my finger hurt and there was poop.
There was poop? Did you fall in poop?
No, like in my pants.
So you pooped your pants?
No, it wasn't me.
So let me get this straight. You smoked something, took a nap, rolled out of your bed in your sleep, hurt your finger, and someone else came along and pooped in your pants before you woke up?
That's what I'm saying. It wasn't me.
My friend, I think you need to take a step back and analyze the situation here. My brother is a general practitioner in rural Tennessee. Enough said, right? He says most of his patients' visits go something like this. Well, person, you're pre-diabetic, have high blood pressure, and are complaining about joint pain. Have you been exercising and cutting out sugar and carbs?
Yeah, I have, doc, but it doesn't seem to help. Do you have any better meds you could prescribe?
Well, let's talk about your diet. How much water do you drink a day?
I don't like water, as I get extra ice in my sweet tea every day to make sure I get enough water.
My brother explains that that's not enough water by a long shot. How much sweet tea are you drinking every day? Those can have a lot of sugar in them.
Well, I get a large one from Hardee's or McDonald's or wherever on my way to work with my breakfast, and another one on my way home for dinner. Then I have a glass or two when I get home.
Well, that's a lot of sugar, and a lot of fast food if you're eating it twice a day. What do you eat at home?
I don't like to cook, so I usually don't eat anything except those little Debbie snack cakes at home.
Those have a lot of sugar too.
I thought that all I had to do was cut out Mountain Dew. Now you're saying I can't eat my food or my snacks? What are you suggesting I do? Eat salads for every meal? Why can't you just up my meds?
I relate to this patient's eating habits a little too much, probably. I had to explain to an adult that you have to brush all the sides of your teeth. Like, no, just the side that shows when you smile is not enough. And yes, flossing is not just a thing for rich people. Patient comes in at 2 a.m. for insomnia, clearly tweaking her brains out. Heart rate at 200. Can't sit still, bouncing off the walls. I suggest maybe easing up on the snow. But doctor, I love the snow. I was working in GP and had a patient scheduled for an appointment. I looked through his notes to gain an idea of why he may be seeing me, and saw he'd been seen a few times with knee pains and shoulder pains and the like. The guy is in his 70s, so probably just arthritis. I'm thinking I'll do an examination of his sore joints and ask a few questions, prescribe some painkillers, and it'll be a quick one. I call him in and he walks in and sits down and is cheery as anything. What seems to be the problem then, sir? I notice you've had some issues recently with sore joints, I ask him. He then proceeds to tell me about his sore knee. So I check his knee and take a history and it all seems fine. I ask if there's anything else, and he remembers actually his neck is sore too. So I check his neck and nothing untoward to be found there either. At this point, he's like, okay, well, thanks doc, I'll be off then. I say to him, oh, good, glad we could help. And you have no other pains at all before you go? He then sits back down and tells me he's been having central crushing chest pain radiating down his left arm and into his jaw since last night, and has been feeling breathless, and when it happened, he had an impending sense of doom. I know a lot of you won't be doctors here, but I'm sure you all recognize the signs of a heart attack there. He had all the classic textbook symptoms. I called the ambulance and he was rushed to the hospital. Sounds like this dude was taking a heart attack like a champ. My dad told me about an extremely religious male patient who was concerned about his nocturnal emissions. He saw it as an offense to God and wanted to know what he could do to stop it. My dad's response? Well, it's gotta go somewhere, my guy. Nurse here, retired after 27 years on the job. The number of American 20-somethings that don't know if they're circumcised or not is surprisingly high. When one with urinary tract infection symptoms needs to be given a specimen for testing, I ask, are you circumcised? If not, I have to tell them to pull back the foreskin before peeing in the cup. The number of guys who have asked, what's that, is way too many. For the record, I can count the number who were uncircumcised on 2 hands. This one's from my cousin, who's a doctor. He was in his first year in a clinic, and people went there to have an appointment because he was good looking. Elderly ladies loved him particularly, but this is totally unrelated. And the worst case was when this elderly lady goes in with her granddaughter, around 8 years old. She had a severely infected wound on her head. Upon close inspection, he saw the wound crawling with small maggots and the smell was terrible. He was very upset, of course, and asked why didn't she wash the wound and bring her earlier. She said she thought it would heal with time and was afraid to wash it, lest water enters her brain and kills her. There was also a woman that took her 6-year-old daughter there to check why she still didn't have pubes. You know, old folks are supposed to be wise, but when it comes to medicinal stuff, a lot of the times they're very much behind the curve. What's the most WTF thing you've experienced or seen during a flight? I travel quite a bit and have seen a few weird things, but on a recent trip from Vienna to Venice, things were taken to a whole new level. So we're about 20 minutes into the flight when I noticed that a woman sitting across from me had a Persian cat in one of those cat carrier bags. The plane was really warm and the cat was sitting in the bag panting. Well, the lady decided to let the cat out of the bag to let it cool off a bit. After trying to shove the cat's face up into the air vents for a minute, the cat literally freaked out. It was clawing at everything, attaching itself to the seats in front, jumping around, hissing, well, you name it. This thing went crazy. Anyway, after about 5 minutes of more of the same, the cat completely lost it, tried to climb the seat in front and, wait for it, fell over dead. We couldn't believe what had just happened. The owner was trying to shake the cat around a bit to wake it up, but it was a goner. For the duration of the flight, she was sat there holding her dead cat, sobbing quite profusely. That's just awful. I would be completely paranoid bringing a pet on a plane, and not because of anything like this happening, just in general. On a red-eye flight, just as I fell asleep, a woman passed out in the middle of the aisle and hit my leg. I was so doped up on Dramamine, I didn't even realize it and fell back asleep. The flight attendants put an oxygen tank on the floor and put the tank masks over her mouth. Apparently, they used my hand to hold it in place. So when I woke up a few minutes later, I was like, why am I holding an oxygen mask over someone's face? Hey, you're literally out there helping save lives in your sleep. I was on a Gulf Air, as in Persian Gulf, flight as a kid in the late 80s, and a Pakistani family a few rows behind me in coach lit up a barbecue. It was one of those little portable aluminum foil things. You never heard so many flight attendants scream so loud. Yeah, talk about different times. I walked onto the plane and gave the first steward I saw a bag of Hershey's miniatures. This is for the crew. The whole flight, I was given free headphones and all the free drinks I could handle. I tried to pay, but she just kept giving me my money back with every drink. Apparently, chocolate's very valuable in the air. I was about 15 and flirting with a cute girl in the seat next to me. My family was about 2 rows back, with my younger brother, and the lady that occupied the third seat pretty much set me up the entire flight. This old lady was the best wingman ever. Anyway, I get up to use the restroom and she says she has to go too. She gets out first and I'm waiting for her to finish up. We've been flirting pretty much the whole flight and she knows that I'm right behind her in line. So she finishes using the bathroom and I walk in. Right there in the toilet is a gigantic unflushed poop. To this day, I have no idea how you respond to something like that. Not really a WTF moment, but kind of funny. So we're flying out of Cleveland and the pilot comes over the PA and gives his welcome, blah blah blah. So we're just leaving Cleveland, we should be in, And then slightly under his breath, but not quiet enough that everyone else didn't hear, he says, "Where the hell are we going?" Long pause. "Chicago." Everyone laughed. Good times and high times. I sat beside a Scientologist who tried to convince me to go into business with him. He wouldn't explain what the business was. How are you going to ask me to invest if you're not even going to tell me what I'm investing in? Come on, buddy. I was flying to Denver on Delta in winter 2009, and they were switching from cash to credit only. They just got their brand new machines to swipe cards, and I was one of the first people to test them out. I ordered a 7 and 7, and it was $7. She took my card, swiped it, and the thing that printed out was $0. I left a $3 tip and thought, cool. About 10 minutes later, she came by and asked if I wanted another. I said, sure, why not? I swiped the card, and another $0 transaction. Bought lunch, $0. So I ordered 4 more 7 and 7s and got hammered for around $20 in tips. I checked my bank account the day after and sure enough, only the tip showed up. I have no idea what happened, but that was one happy flight attendant. Sounds like you did pretty well for yourself too, my friend. A guy died next to me once. On a flight from Maui to Dallas, I was half asleep in the second to last row of the plane. While I was listening to music and dozing, I suddenly heard a really loud, hard thud next to me. I look over and there's a man lying on the ground, completely still. I thought maybe he tripped, but the flight attendant came running and he was unresponsive. She frantically ran up and down the aisles asking for doctors. Luckily for him, the flight was full of vacationing doctors and nurses. All of them in ridiculous clothes. 2 of the doctors who came back were in Hawaiian shirts and golf attire, and the female nurse who came back was wearing a very strappy, revealing blue Hawaiian print dress. The doctors tried to wake the man up, but he was gone. I was surprised to find out just how much medical equipment they have on commercial flights. The docs whipped out a portable defibrillator and shocked the guy, then set up an IV drip for him. I never heard a word out of him or saw him move. Not sure if he actually woke up or not. Our flight was diverted to LA, and when we landed, half a dozen EMT personnel ran onto the plane to pull the guy out on a gurney. Unfortunately for me, this scenario set off a panic attack, and I had to go find a nice spot in the aisle to lie down so that I didn't pass out and cause more problems for the crew and doctors. It was kind of embarrassing. One time, I was the only person on a very big plane from DC to Atlanta. They told me they wouldn't normally fly, but they really needed the plane in Atlanta first thing in the morning. I got great service, by the way. Since then, I've used this as the setting for an erotic fantasy. An older man unsuccessfully attempting to get some action from his wife in the seat in front of me. Honey, I got the blanket in place. My wife was coming to visit me in Africa a few months ago. On some third world airline, a passenger sitting next to her pulls out his thing and starts peeing into a bottle, then hands it to the stewardess who didn't even bat an eye. I'm sorry, is there no bathroom on the plane? I was in an aisle seat on a flight from LA to Austin, Texas. About an hour into the flight, I noticed this awful smell. I look up from my book just in time to see this 70-year-old woman violently throwing up in her lap. Since I'm a sympathy vomiter, I turn towards the people in the other seats to try and avoid doing the same thing. After about a minute of this and the rancid smell of old people vomit, she's led to the bathroom. As she's leaving her seat, she poops herself in the seat. So I get to spend the rest of the flight gagging as this poop and vomit aroma assaults my nostrils. The flight attendants tried to clean it up as best as they could, but it made no real improvement. Ugh, that's awful to have to sit through, but also just kind of feel bad for that lady. She's obviously having a really rough time. While waiting to use the bathroom on the way to Panama, the door somehow opened while this guy was hunched over the toilet, pleasuring himself. At first, I couldn't believe what I actually saw. As his head turned to see the door come open, the most awkward eye contact moment of my life unfolded. He turned to shut the door in a panicked fashion, exposing his junk. At that point, my WTF face became encrusted into my facial features for the rest of the flight, and even the next day. Ever since that time, I can hardly use any bathroom on a plane. I was taking a business flight to Chicago when, about halfway through the flight, a man was walking back to the lavatory but completely passed out and hit the floor next to me. People started chattering and calling for help while this guy pops out of first class and says, "Don't worry, I'm a doctor," and addresses the situation like a boss. It was Dr. Oz. Oh, great. Is there any other doctor on board? On the way to Japan, I look across the aisle and see an old man sitting with an old woman I assume to be his wife. He reaches into his bag and pulls out a large stash of adult magazines and proceeds to sit and look at them for many hours of the flight. I'm sure he says he just reads them for the articles. I was flying Calgary to Houston, which is about a 4-hour direct flight. We were just about 2 hours into the flight, or coincidentally, just about to Denver, when the pilot announced we would have to turn back to Calgary. So around we go and land in about an hour 15. He really cranked it. We touch down and taxi over to the mechanics. They open the cargo door and shut it again. And in 15 more minutes, we were fueled up and in the air and off to Houston. This time it was about a 3-hour flight, full thrust the whole way. Luckily, there was an industry guy behind me and I overheard him speculating the reason. His idea was that since the airline had paid mechanics in Calgary and probably not in Denver, it would be cheaper for them to turn all the way around to Calgary than pay all the costs associated with landing in Denver. Luckily, it was just a little glitch and not a true problem, but it was anyone's guess the true issue. I have a friend that's familiar with the inner workings of the plane, and he said that anytime they open the cargo door and unplug a certain cable during maintenance, some switch has to be flipped to reset the alarm system for that door. He said it's an extremely common mistake for that switch to not get flipped after work has been done, and it results in false alarms. All that cost, likely in the tens of thousands, because one guy forgot to flip a switch. I'd be more annoyed at the waste of time, honestly. Just land in Denver, come on. On a flight a few weeks ago, the flight attendant started to make preparations for landing, telling people to put their trays up and whatnot. I noticed the flight attendant loudly speaking to a man in his late 20s or early 30s sitting 2 rows in front of me. "Sir, you need to put your seat back up. Sir, sir." The guy starts spitting blood and convulsing. It sounded like he was choking on the blood with each gasp of air. The flight attendant starts screaming for help and they make an announcement over the PA for a doctor. 4 passengers and all flight attendants leap into action. Turns out, the lady in the row between me and the sick man is a nurse. Together, they get him laid out in the row with his head in the aisle. He's not responding to their questions and he's fading in and out of consciousness. We make an emergency landing, 20 minutes ahead of schedule. As we're taxiing, he regains consciousness and tells the flight attendant holding his head that he's sorry for the trouble. We land, paramedics meet the plane and carry him off. He seemed to be stable, but I hope everything worked out for the guy. Yeah, that's gotta be a really scary moment for everyone around. Spitting blood and convulsing is not something that you want happening on a plane. This one happened to my cousin. He was flying in South America, and about halfway through the flight, he realizes he really needs to go to the bathroom. The plane he's on is a tiny prop plane made for tiny people. He's 6'5". He awkwardly climbs over his aisle mates and stumbles and shuffles to the back of the plane. As he's closing the door, the captain comes on the loudspeaker and warns of upcoming turbulence. He thinks, screw it, I really need to pee. He crams himself into this tiny bathroom and manages to whip it out. And right as he starts to pee, they hit a huge bit of turbulence that knocks him off his feet, backwards, through the bathroom door, and flat on his back in the aisle, still peeing straight up in the air. He was completely mortified and managed to get back up, pick up the door, and work himself back into the bathroom. He waited for like 20 minutes hoping no one would have seen it or that they would have forgotten about it by then, but when he went back out to take his seat, he got a standing ovation from every single person on the plane. Ouch. I feel like this story might be a little bit embellished, but I like the visuals here. I used to travel internationally a lot when I was younger and working for a telecom company designing new infrastructure. On one of the trips as we were heading to China, I looked out the window. We were above Alaska and bearing straight somewhere, and the horizon had a huge slice of black, like some weird wedge-shaped cloud that encompassed half the horizon. It was a bright day on the ground or sea below us. The ice was very bright and white, but there was this giant dark wedge encompassing and seeming to take over the earth as you looked out to the horizon. I had the guys next to me take a look out as well, and they were confused at first too. I was really confused for a few minutes. Then I realized what I was looking at in profile and what that black engulfing wedge really was. It was night. We were flying in such a manner that we were surfing the edge of daytime and nighttime at 35,000 feet. And at that moment, if you looked out over the horizon, you saw daytime fading into night. I only saw it that once. It was being in the right place at the right time. Aside from bad in-flight movies, that would be my most WTF experience. That sounds like that would be absolutely incredible to see. I'd love to see photos of something like that. I'm sure you could find it on Google. The bathroom sink on a Bangladeshi Airlines flight from Thailand to Nepal was clogged and had about 1,000 water bugs living in it. I was on a plane that lost power just as it was throttling up for takeoff. And I don't mean they reduced power to the engines. I mean all the lights went out, the engines shut down, and we were left sitting on the runway for a good few minutes. Somehow the plane regained power and we taxied to an adjacent tarmac for another few minutes. After this, the pilot announces to the rest of the passengers that they had a small technical glitch and that we're now ready for takeoff. The rest of the ride was uneventful. I mean, yeah, you would want that to be the end of the events. You don't want that happening in the air. I was on a flight home from South Africa after a family vacation. My dad is diabetic, but he usually keeps his blood sugar levels pretty regulated, so I never worried before. Mid-flight, I wake up from a nap and see him slumped over the side of his seat. He was taken to the back of the plane where 3 doctors were examining him. They said his heartbeat went up to 220 or something, which I think means he was about an inch from death. All I remember is seeing my mom and brother break down. I began having flashes of life without my father, and it overwhelmed me. I felt sick to my stomach, imagining what life would be like, when all of a sudden his heart rate stabilized. The doctors on board said that it was a miracle, and I felt so much relief. The plane had to stop in Senegal where my dad was transferred to a hospital. He wanted me to keep going since the semester was starting soon. That flight home alone was terrible. I felt the other passengers watching me the entire time. He's all right now, but every time I get on a plane, I remember that feeling of leaving the whole world behind. I was on a flight from Amsterdam to New York one time, and there was this kid who was running up and down the aisles trying to bite people. As he was heading down the aisle at full speed, a stewardess suddenly pulled the refreshment cart into the aisle right in front of him, and he ran smack into it face first. She said to him, "Oh, sorry, didn't see you coming. You shouldn't run down the aisle like that," or something like that. I know she did that on purpose. It was awesome. Hey, you know what? Someone had to. I went to Vegas with my wife. First, let me say it was an early flight. We got there extra early for check-in. Put our bags to the side so as not to get in anyone's way. This 300+ pound greaseball wearing a Hawaiian shirt and shorts comes waddling in with one carry-on bag. Remember this as it's important. And knocks over my neatly stacked out-of-the-way baggage. It's also 15 degrees outside. Freezing, and 5:15 in the morning. I'm like, whatever, no big deal. Later, we get on the plane. My wife has the window, I'm in the middle, and here comes too fat for the seat Hawaiian guy with his little bag to sit on the end next to me. Great. Believe me when I tell you, this guy smelled like a dead animal covered in throw up and poop. I literally dry heaved when he sat down next to me. The guy had a carry-on bag that he was clenching like it contained something of the utmost importance. Obviously not deodorant. And he was sweating through his thin red flowered shirt while everyone else was bundled in heavy winter jackets. We hadn't even taken off yet and I was becoming violently ill smelling this guy. I had to stuff my face in my sweater and throw my head into my wife's lap to try and escape the smell. After an hour, the guy became increasingly fidgety and paranoid. This made him sweat more. I can't figure out how a guy who sweated so much was so fat. He was like a walking sauna of used banana hammocks. Finally, the guy got up to use the bathroom, and as soon as he closed the bathroom door, people began ripping cologne and perfume ads out of magazines and rubbing them on his sweat-soaked chair. I kid you not. People were offering their apologies to me for having to sit next to him. And then the stewardess comes over and says, "I'm sorry, the flight is booked. There's nowhere else to put him." And I'm staring at her like, what? I never even said anything to anyone about it. That's when I realized this guy was such a disgusting mess. People were actually rallying around trying to help me. It was the weirdest moment of my life. For the next 5 hours, he made about 20 more trips to the bathroom, and each time, different rows would come over to rub his seat down with cologne. Oh, and guess what was in the bag? Adult magazines. Piles of adult magazines. He took a new one to the bathroom with him each time. I haven't been on a plane since. Yeah, that's gotta be just about the worst person you'd have to sit next to on an airplane. I was on a flight to Chicago. We were supposed to land at O'Hare, but about 30 minutes before landing, they told us it was too icy and we were diverted to Midway. The two are about 26 miles apart. So we land at Midway, we disembark, and as we're leaving the Skyway, a gate agent runs up and tells us we need to get back on the plane. They were now going to take us to O'Hare. We all said, screw it, we'll stay here. She then informed us our bags wouldn't be getting unloaded. We would need to go to the other airport to get them. So about 5 of us out of a full flight of 90 got back on and had to wait about 20 minutes to de-ice the plane, then a 15-minute flight to O'Hare. From the flyer's point of view, this just seems like a complete waste of time. I get that they must need the plane at that airport for something, but come on. Everyone's already deboarded, you got a few people left, just roll with it. The die has been cast. Not my story, but my sister's. She was once on a long-haul flight from London to Hong Kong. During the night, while everyone was sleeping, suddenly a woman let out the most blood-curdling scream. Since this wasn't long after 9/11, everyone was pretty on edge as it was. It turned out that the woman had just had a bad dream. Everyone was pretty annoyed after that. Hey, come on, it's not her fault. She has no control over that. I get that you guys would be annoyed, but come on, give her a break. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, linked at the top of the description. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot, linked in the description as well. Either way, thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.